Is that we would like, the very deep and good transatlantic partnership to continue. And of course, and this has been the Finnish position all along, Europe needs to be ramping up its own deterrence and defense. But it just doesn't happen overnight, and we need partners and friends in this endeavor where we are effectively defending ourselves against autocracy and against very dark forces in the world.
And where are the current discussions standing, or where are they heading to when it comes to sending peacekeeping troops from Europe to secure possible peace in Ukraine?
We are in the process of looking at different alternatives. The thing is, we can't be rushing into any sort of a deal. A ceasefire in itself is extremely dangerous for Ukraine if it's not properly backed up. And therefore, we need to not just coordinate this effort together with the other European countries, but of course also with the United States and especially Ukraine. But at this stage, the work strands that Europe has been involved in all along. So aiding Ukraine, keeping up the economic pressure towards Russia, but also ramping up its own defense. All these three work strands will continue, and those are exactly the right ones in this moment.
What about Georgia? What's on the agenda today?
Well, Georgia will be having an update on the situation. We have been monitoring and seeing over the course of the past weeks and months that the Georgian people would have wanted to have a different fate for themselves than what the government is currently involved in. And I'm also saying this as the CIO of OSCE this year, so we are very concerned with the situation.
Macron is traveling to Washington today and Keir Starmer tomorrow. So does it mean that if Trump wants to call Europe, he will be able to call Macron from now on? Or how do you ensure that Europe is speaking with one voice?
Well, High Representative Kaja Kallas is also traveling there. And I think since we are not a federation of Europeans, at least not yet, we are a union of 27 member states. I think we should be so glad that we have been able to be fairly unified over the course of the past 3 years. And definitely we have been extremely powerful in aiding Ukraine in the struggle, but also ramping up our own position in what comes to defense and deterrence. We just have to continue with this. And I wouldn't see any huge worry if there's, different people representing Europe, because at the end of the day, we do find a very unified voice in the most difficult issues.
Minister, one follow-up on Georgia, please. Do you see new elections as a kind of resolved situation in this dead? What do you think about this issue?
The OSCE's ODIHR report gave a very good initiative for the Georgian people to demand a new election.
How should Europe finance its defense industry? Where should the money come from?
A significant bit of it should come from the private sector, and we should
African descent.
Do everything that is possible in order to incentivize the private sector and at least take away all those hurdles we have put in the way of private money finding themselves into the defense sector, meaning the ESG criteria and all of the sustainable financing criteria, which in the past years has not given room for the defense industry. At the same time, if we are not able to fund sufficiently our defense industry, I don't think we are sustainable in the long term, and I'm not just talking about the environment here. So getting rid of those hurdles, at the same time, of course, our states need to be also active in this, and I think also the European Union. And now I'm looking forward to the white paper on defence, which will come out in a couple of weeks' time, and that will duly focus on European efforts together and joint efforts on this regard.
Would common debts also be an option?
Well, you know what? I think the main target is that we ramp up our defence, and that certainly needs a more powerful and stronger capacity in our defence industry. And everything we do needs to be adherent to NATO's operational and defence targets. So while these criteria are fulfilled, then I think what comes to the funding that is certainly something that will be that we will be able to resolve. And also debt funding is definitely not off the table.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Minister, just one question about Ukraine, please. How you can guarantee, Minister, how you can get...
Thank you.
For a discussion on how digitalization can enhance the Sustainable Development Goals. We are convinced that digitalization will impact young people in Africa. Throughout each of these engagements, I will emphasize the indispensable contribution of civil society
Dzień dobry Państwu.
to advancing
Dzisiejsze
human
drugie
rights.
posiedzenie.
The work of civil society is vital both to this Council and to the broader human rights agenda. That is a message I delivered at my town hall with civil society organizations held in New York just 2 weeks ago. We will also host the annual high-level debate on crime prevention. That will mark the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, the Nelson Mandela Rules. The high-level debate on crime prevention will address the global prison challenge. That would mark the 10th anniversary of the Nelson Mandela Rules to ensure humane treatment of prisoners. This year, we will also be awarding the Nelson Mandela Prize. This award is given every 5 years to 2 individuals who have dedicated their lives to serving humanity. I invite member states and other relevant stakeholders to submit nominations before the end of this month so that we can identify individuals who would honor the legacy of Nelson Mandela. The prize will coincide with the celebration of the Nelson Mandela International Day on 18th July. Excellencies, all these topics are closely related to my vision. These topics aim to promote human rights and preserve human dignity for all everywhere. As President of the General Assembly, I aim to advance the global human rights agenda. We are mindful that strengthening cooperation between the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, 2 vital pillars of the United Nations, has never been more urgent. I urge all member states to ensure that the Human Rights Council remains a platform for genuine dialogue and meaningful cooperation to promote and protect human rights for everyone, everywhere. Greater resources and support are essential to enabling the Council to fulfill its mandate effectively, particularly as global challenges continue to increase. I look forward to working with all of you to further promote cooperation and complementarity between the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. Our shared goal is upholding human rights and dignity for everyone, everywhere. I thank you.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale, je vous remercie pour votre déclaration. J'ai à présent l'honneur d'inviter Son Excellence Monsieur Antonio Guterres, secrétaire général des Nations Unies, à prendre la parole. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. President of the Human Rights Council, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We begin this session under the weight of a grim milestone, the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in violation of the UN Charter. More than 12,600 civilians killed, with many more injured. Entire communities reduced to rubble, hospitals and schools destroyed. We must spare no effort to bring an end to this conflict and to achieve a just and lasting peace in line with the UN Charter, international law and General Assembly resolutions. Conflicts like the war in Ukraine exact a heavy toll on people, a toll on fundamental principles like territorial integrity, sovereignty and the rule of law, and a toll on the vital business of this Council. Without respect for human rights, civil, cultural, economic, political and social, sustainable peace is a pipe dream. And like this Council, human rights shine a light in the darkest places. Through your work and the work of the High Commissioner's Office around the world, you are supporting brave human rights defenders, risking persecution, detention and even death. You are working with government, civil society and others to strengthen action on human rights, and you are supporting investigations and accountability. 5 years ago, we launched our call to action for human rights, embedding human rights across the work of the United Nations around the world in close cooperation with our partners. I will continue supporting this important work and the High Commissioner's Office as we fight for human rights everywhere. Excellencies, we have our work cut out for us. Human rights are the oxygen of humanity, but one by one, human rights are being suffocated by autocrats crushing opposition because they fear what a truly empowered people would do, by a patriarchy that keeps girls out of school and women at arm's length from basic rights, by wars and violence that strip populations of their right to food, water and education, by warmongers who thumb their nose at international law, international humanitarian law and the UN Charter. Human rights are being suffocated by the climate crisis and by a morally bankrupt global financial system that too often obstructs the path to greater equality and sustainable development. By runaway technologies like artificial intelligence that hold great promise, but also the ability to violate human rights at the touch of a button. By growing intolerance against entire groups, from indigenous peoples to migrants and refugees, to the LGBTQI+ community, to persons with disabilities. And by voices of division and anger who view human rights not as a boon to humanity, but as a barrier to the power, profit and control they seek. In short, human rights are on the ropes and being pummeled hard. And this represents a direct threat to all of the hard-work mechanisms and systems established over the last 80 years to protect and advance human rights. But as the recently adopted Pact for the Future reminds us, human rights are in fact a source of solutions. And the Pact provides a playbook on how we can win the fight for human rights on several fronts. First, human rights through peace and peace through human rights. Conflicts inflict human rights violations on a massive scale. In the occupied Palestinian territory, violations of human rights have skyrocketed since the horrific Hamas attacks of October 7 and the intolerable levels of death and destruction in Gaza. And I am gravely concerned by the rising violence in the occupied West Bank by Israel's settlers and other violations, as well as calls for annexation. We are witnessing a precarious ceasefire. We must avoid at all costs a resumption of hostilities. The people in Gaza have already suffered too much. It's time for a permanent ceasefire, the dignified release of all remaining hostages, irreversible progress towards a two-state solution, an end to the occupation, and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Gaza as an integral part. In Sudan, bloodshed, displacement and famine are engulfing the country. The warring parties must take immediate action to protect civilians, uphold human rights, cease hostilities and forge peace. And domestic and international human rights monitoring and investigation mechanisms should be permitted to document what's happening on the ground. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we see a deadly whirlwind of violence and horrifying human rights abuses, amplified by the recent M23 offensive supported by the Rwandan Defence Forces. As more cities fall, the risk of a regional war rises. It's time to silence the guns. It's time for diplomacy and dialogue. The recent joint summit in Tanzania offered a way forward with a renewed call for an immediate ceasefire. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected. The Congolese people deserve peace. In the Sahel, I call for a renewed regional dialogue to protect citizens from terrorism and systemic violations of human rights and to create the conditions for sustainable development. In Myanmar, the situation has grown far worse in the 4 years since the military seized power and arbitrarily detained members of the democratically elected government. We need greater cooperation to bring an end to the hostilities and forge a path towards an inclusive democratic transition and the return to civilian rule, allowing for the safe return of the Rohingya refugees. And in the coming days, I will put forward proposals to the United Nations Security Council for greater stability and security for the people of Haiti, namely through an effective UN assistance mechanism to support the authorities. A durable solution.
Distinguished members of the press, today I'm very pleased to host my distinguished counterpart, Foreign Minister Lavrov in Ankara, and I would like to say welcome to him and the accompanying delegation. Distinguished colleagues, the global and regional dynamics are changing very rapidly, and each and every day we're coming across new challenges that we need to fight against, and we are coming across new opportunities that we need to pay attention to. In such an area, the indirect and direct developments that we need to pay attention to make it important that we need to increase our consultation and coordination between Turkey and the Russian Federation. In relation to the targets that our President and President Putin are targeting, we need to actually deepen the cooperation in bilateral issues and international matters. With this understanding, we had productive deliberations with Foreign Minister Lavrov today. We dealt with the bilateral agenda in a detailed manner, and we also discussed as to how to advance our cooperation further. From energy to tourism, from commerce to energy, we can actually deepen our relations. The multilateral cooperation with the contribution of the relevant institutions can actually further be deepened in various fields. Distinguished members of the press, today is the third year of the war between Russian Federation and Ukraine. We want both our neighbors to live in peace, welfare, and the further stability, and we need to see the end of loss of life and destruction that war is causing. This war is actually affecting the various geographies, including the global south, in a negative manner. This multidimensional crisis, we want to see the end of it with a permanent solution. Since the first day, we want to see the solution of this war through diplomacy, and immediately after the clashes started, we actually gathered the parties through a peace table, around a peace table in Istanbul for the first time. And we initiated the Black Sea grain deal in a successful manner. We actually conducted the diplomatic efforts to reach the peace effort in many different stages. Today, we are seeing that the United States is actually starting a new initiative that wants to see the war coming to an end through peaceful initiatives. and this overlaps with our policy that we have been conducting since the beginning of the war. This new initiatives of the United States is a result-oriented approach, and we attach great importance to it. And we do believe that the result can be achieved with negotiations that both parties can participate in. Within this framework, we will be ready to support the establishment of peace through all negotiations. And as before, we are ready to host negotiations. We are also conducting our initiatives to reach safety of navigation in Black Sea. And we believe that this is going to be a confidence-building measure if this is established. Our final target is to establish a permanent peace between our two neighbors. Distinguished friends, in order to establish a permanent welfare in our region, we believe that the recent developments in Syria is bringing hope to our region. The Syrian people have actually ended a 60-year persecution regime, and now they want to have a stable and peaceful country that has peace with its neighbors. And then during this process, as Turkey, we will be siding with the people of Syria. Today, Foreign Minister Lavrov undertook the developments of Syria in our deliberations, and we believe that the territorial integrity and unity needs to be kept in Syria. And we do believe separatist movements should not be allowed. On the other hand, the terrorist organizations should not be allowed to be nested in Syria. We believe that international society need to have a joint stance via Daesh and PKK-YPG, and in such institutions, the safety concerns of Turkey should be respected by each and every party and respected. Today, distinguished members of the press, we also took the initiatives in Gaza and the latest status quo. And of course, the ceasefire needs to be permanent, and the relevant steps following this need to be taken. There is deep concern that the war could be reinitiated, and we cannot allow a new genocide to be allowed. On the other hand, the attacks vis-a-vis West Bank should not be allowed. On the other hand, a forced migration of Palestinians from their own soil cannot be allowed, and such initiatives are doomed to be unsuccessful. The countries of the region should need a joint stance, and it is actually satisfying to see the Russian Federation has the same understanding on this point. The Israel attacks vis-a-vis Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria needs to be met with a joint stance via the international society. This is the only way of a permanent peace and safety and security of the Middle East. Distinguished members of the press, the issues are actually putting forward the depth and the strategic importance of the relations between Turkey and the Russian Federation. Mutual understanding and constructive dialogue will continue to be strengthened, and in the coming days, both in relation to bilateral and regional and international issues, the close dialogue will be continued. I will once again say welcome to the delegation and to Foreign Minister Lavrov, and leave the floor to him. The floor is yours, sir.
des engagements en matière de renforcement.
Thank you very much, distinguished members of the press. First of all, on behalf of the delegation and myself, I would like to say and express my gratitude to Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and to his accompanying delegation. We had a wide spectrum of issues that we discussed in relation to the issues that we discussed. Thank you very much for the warm welcome that you have extended. The Russian Federation, with pleasure, despite the international tensions, is seeing that there is a constructive dialogue between Turkey and the Russian Federation. President Putin and President Erdogan is in constant contact. Apart from the telephone diplomacy, they had two face-to-face contacts last year, both during the June meeting in Astana, in the Shanghai organization, and also in Kazan during the BRICS meeting. These were the two bilateral meetings. The targets that were put forward by the presidents have been adopted by the foreign ministries as well as the other institutions like the defense ministries and our intelligence institutions. Of course, with the Foreign Minister Fidan, we discussed and we have been discussing these issues for hours at end, the bilateral issues as well as at the regional platforms. Our recent meetings was in Johannesburg in the G20 platform, and we also attach great importance to the meeting between the parliaments. In September, the Speaker of the Turkish National Assembly, Numan Kurtulmuş, paid a visit to the Russian Federation and was received by President Putin.
In the rights, needs and aspirations of the Ukrainian people, in accountability and in the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. The decisions that are made today, whether they foster justice or impunity, will shape what follows. In Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, where the suffering has been unbearable, I repeat my call for an independent investigation into grave violations of international law committed by Israel in the course of its attacks across Gaza and by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups. Any sustainable solution must be based on accountability, on justice, the right to self-determination, and the human rights and dignity of both Israelis and Palestinians. Any suggestion of forcing people from their land is completely unacceptable. Mr. President, Excellencies, beyond Ukraine and Gaza, conflicts and crises are tearing communities and societies apart, from Sudan to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Haiti, Myanmar and Afghanistan. Social tensions are rising as inequalities and injustices breed resentment, often directed at refugees, at migrants and the most vulnerable. Perversely, the richest 1% control more wealth than the majority of humanity. The climate crisis is a human rights catastrophe, crushing lives and livelihoods. Its cascading impacts on food security, on migration, on health, on energy and water threaten human rights now and for generations to come, particularly for women and girls. Meanwhile, digital technologies are widely misused to suppress, limit and violate our rights through surveillance, online hatred, harmful disinformation, harassment and built-in discrimination. Artificial intelligence brings new speed and scale to these threats. The splintering of social media platforms into self-selecting channels that cater to their audience contributes to the isolation of individuals, the atomization of societies, and the loss of a shared public space. And in some quarters, human rights are being shunned, vilified, and distorted. This is the backdrop against which my office and the broader human rights ecosystem, including this Council, are working to promote and safeguard the rights of everyone everywhere. Last year, for example, my office contributed to the release of over 3,000 arbitrarily detained people. We took part in some 11,000 human rights monitoring missions, observed nearly 1,000 trials, and documented some 15,000 situations of human rights violations around the world. In addition to the daily interventions with governments, we issued about 245 statements shining a light on human rights concerns in some 130 countries. Our teams on the ground are supporting countries to improve their laws and institutions and to adopt social and economic policies that reinforce cohesion and address injustice. We contributed to human rights-based approaches to sustainable development, taxation and public spending from Cambodia to Jordan and Serbia. Support to my office is a low-cost, high-impact investment. I call on you to go the extra mile to make sure that my office, your own national human rights institutions, and human rights non-governmental organizations can continue to do this essential work. Excellencies, since the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, despite setbacks, we have made steady progress. Freedom expanded, particularly for oppressed communities. There was widespread understanding that human rights are the foundation of effective governance, sound economic policies, and social cohesion. Today, we can no longer take that basic understanding and progress for granted. The global consensus on human rights is crumbling under the weight of authoritarians, of strongmen, and oligarchs. By some estimates, autocrats now control around 1/3 of the world's economy, more than double the proportion 30 years ago. Leaders cite national security and the fight against terrorism to justify gross violations. Hypocrisy, double standards, and impunity have also played a part. Regional powers that are neutral or hostile to human rights are growing in influence. Everywhere, we see attempts to ignore, to undermine, and to redefine human rights, and to create a false binary that pits one right against another in a zero-sum game. There are concerted efforts to chip away at gender equality and the rights of migrants, refugees, people with disabilities, and minorities of all kinds. But human rights, from the right to food and adequate housing to the rights to health and education and freedom of speech, are for everyone. And we need an all-out effort by everyone to make sure that human rights and the rule of law remain foundational to communities, societies, and international relations. Otherwise, the picture is very dangerous. In previous centuries, the unrestrained use of force by the powerful, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, population transfers, and child labor were commonplace. Dictators could order atrocity crimes consigning vast numbers of people to their deaths. Be aware, this can happen again. But we are far from powerless to prevent it. Our tools are the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the body of international law, and the institutions that work to implement them, including this Council, my office, courts and judiciary, civil society, independent journalists, and human rights defenders around the world. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, today we need an alternative vision. We need the politics of wisdom, rooted in facts, the law, and compassion. First, human rights are about facts. That is why my office is monitoring, documenting, and reporting on violations and abuses in war zones and crises around the world. And I will provide details in my global update next week. In addition to Ukraine and the occupied Palestinian territory, examples include the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Myanmar, Sudan, and Syria, where my office has been documenting abuses and raising the alarm for a couple of years. Or Afghanistan, where we are reporting on the impact of gender apartheid on women and girls, or Haiti, where my team has reported on the devastating impact of illicit flows of weapons. Never underestimate the power of factual, legal and moral clarity. Facts on their own can and must prompt action. When the red flags go up, they must trigger an immediate response. That is why the work of this Council and the other human rights mechanisms is so important. While we cannot say exactly how much death and suffering has been prevented by these efforts, we know they make a difference. Second, human rights are about the law, which is a brake on power, privilege, and unrestrained profit. Some things are not for sale. Our international legal frameworks and institutions, including the International Criminal Court, are fundamental to ensuring justice and achieving accountability for the most serious of crimes, preventing future violations and making the world safer for everyone. Equally important are strong institutions at the national level to protect vulnerable people and enable everyone to participate more fully in cultural, religious, social, economic and public life. It is imperative that we stand up for these institutions when they come under attack. Finally, human rights are nothing without compassion, the glue that unites us in our common humanity. We rarely hear about compassion from today's leaders, but some of the most successful visionaries throughout history, including Nelson Mandela and Eleanor Roosevelt, have led through their remarkable compassion. Human rights go beyond thought leadership to heart leadership. They tap into some of our most cherished ideals of how people should treat each other and the meaning of human dignity. Because of that, they are widely popular. Human rights have been central to movements for equality and justice throughout history, from the anti-slavery, anti-racism, anti-apartheid struggles to the labor movement, from decolonization to the civil rights movement, the women's movement, marriage equality, and the LGBTIQ+ movement, Black Lives Matter, the indigenous rights movement, the disability rights movement, the climate justice movement, and beyond. Human rights have universal power to move people to action. In countries where human rights are not widely respected, people will risk their lives to defend them. And I want to pay tribute to brave human rights activists and defenders everywhere. This is why even the most repressive governments often use the language of human rights to try to justify themselves. They know that human rights abuses trigger revulsion and reduce their power and influence. Upholding human rights makes eminent sense for stability, for prosperity, for a better common future. Human rights are a winning proposition for humanity, and we will continue to promote, protect, and defend them around the world with humility, determination, and an indomitable hope. Thank you.
Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, je vous remercie pour votre allocution. Enfin, j'ai le plaisir d'inviter le chef du département fédéral des affaires étrangères de la Suisse, son Excellence M. Ignazio Cassis, à prononcer son discours au nom du pays hôte. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Monsieur le Président du Conseil des droits de l'homme, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire aux droits de l'homme, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, comme chaque année, j'ai le plaisir de vous accueillir à Genève aujourd'hui. Mais aujourd'hui, je le fais avec un sentiment partagé, une grande fierté et une profonde inquiétude. D'un côté, la fierté. Le 9 octobre 2024, l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies a élu la Suisse au Conseil des droits de l'homme pour les 3 prochaines années avec 175 voix sur 190. Votre confiance envers mon pays nous honore et je vous en remercie. Genève a également été le témoin d'un moment historique. Par acclamation, notre ambassadeur Jürg Lauber a été désigné 19e président du Conseil des droits de l'homme pour cette année. C'est la première fois qu'un haut diplomate suisse assume cette fonction. Ceci pour la fierté. Je viens à l'autre côté, à l'inquiétude. Notre planète est en souffrance.
And also
είναι η αναφορά για τον μηχανισμό της αγροτικής θωράκισης. Για μας, ο μηχανισμός αυτός είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικός, αλλά δεν θέλουμε να εξετάζει μόνο τις επιπτώσεις που έχουν διάφορες νομοθετικές ρυθμίσεις στον αγροτικό κόσμο, αλλά ταυτόχρονα να δημιουργεί και το πλαίσιο, έτσι ώστε να αναπτύσσονται οι αγροτικές περιοχές για να μπορούν να δίνουν και ένα επιπρόσθετο εισόδημα στους αγρότες και τις αγρότησές μας. Επίσης, σήμερα συζητάμε και για τις γεωργικές αγορές και για το πώς έτσι εξελίσσονται με τα νέα δεδομένα. Ως Κύπρος θυμίζω ότι έχουμε ζητήσει και έχουμε εξασφαλίσει από την Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή μια σημαντική στήριξη μέσα από το γεωργικό αποθεματικό 3,5 εκατομμυρίων ευρώ για τη στήριξη του αγροτικού κόσμου, ο οποίος βιώνει τις συνέπειες της ανοβρίας με απώλεια εισοδήματος. Καλούμε την Επιτροπή να συνεχίσει να είναι έμπραχτα αρρωγός δίπλα στους αγρότες και τις αγρότησες μας για να μπορούν να ανταπεξέλθουν στις προκλήσεις που διανύουμε. Με την ολοκλήρωση του σημερινού Συμβουλίου μεταβαίνω στη Γαλλία μετά από πρόσκληση της Γαλλίδας ομολόγου μου, με αφορμή φυσικά και την αγροτική έκθεση που γίνεται αυτή την περίοδο στο Παρίσι. Εκεί θα έχουμε την ευκαιρία να συζητήσουμε σε μια υπουργική σύσκεψη, αλλά να έχουμε και μια διμερή συνάντηση μαζί με την Γαλλίδα Υπουργό Γεωργίας, όπου εκεί θα καθορίσουμε και το κοινό πλαίσιο, αν θέλετε, μέσα στο οποίο θα πορευτούμε και οι δύο, με δεδομένη την νέα συζήτηση για την κοινή αγροτική πολιτική και το νέο πλαίσιο που θέλουμε αυτή να περιλαμβάνει. Ευχαριστώ.
It's great to be here in Brussels again for the February meeting of the Agfish Council, where we will be discussing a number of very important issues, in particular Commissioner Hansen's recently published vision for agriculture and food, which at its heart, is the basis for the next CAP and discussions around that, where we're putting food security, farmer income supports and balanced regional development at the heart of that. This will be a key part, as I say, in the build-up to the new CAP, and Ireland, holding the presidency of the EU in the second half of 2026, will have a key role and pivotal role to play at that time, and I look forward to understanding all the views of colleagues around the table before we have that presidency, and understanding the perspective from Commissioner Hansen as we work to put our best foot forward for Europe. On the agenda today also is the rural proofing policy, where we want to see, ultimately, as any policies are developed, that they're looked through the rural lens, and its impact on our rural communities is always borne in mind as those policies are being developed. In the market update today, I will be raising the points around the devastating impact of Storm Owen on many of our farming enterprises in Ireland. I'll be thanking Member States for their support, from power generators to European colleagues coming to Ireland to help us restore power for so many people, where we had record outages of power following that storm. I'll also be reiterating Ireland's support for Ukraine on this, the 3rd anniversary of the brutal invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and we will be discussing a range of those matters there today.
Minister, you're going to discuss Iran too. Do you know what is on the agenda on that front?
No, I'm not aware of that being on the agenda for today.
And Ukraine, what is generally, what are you hoping to achieve here?
Well, look, on this, the 3rd anniversary of the invasion and the illegal invasion of Ukraine, we will be reiterating our solidarity with Ukraine and standing with the Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Dobré ráno. Dobrý den. Můžeme? Dneska se koná druhé zasedání Rady ministrů Agrifish tady v Bruselu. Myslím, že hlavním tématem, které je velmi očekávané, je vize evropského zemědělství a potravinářství do roku 2040, tak jak minulý týden byla představena panem komisařem Hansenem. Já musím říct, že jsem využil i své pozice v rámci Evropské lidové strany. Měli jsme teď ráno hodinové jednání ministrů za Evropskou lidovou stranu s panem komisařem Hansenem, čili velmi intenzivně jsme to téma už diskutovali i jednotlivé národní pohledy a národní stanoviska k té vizi. Za Českou republiku mohu říci, že ta vize do značné míry naplní.
And the regime and also the Brussels bureaucracy, the Washington bureaucracy banned us. So the principle was that we withdraw from being a member of NATO. There are not going to be military bases. We will not do any military maneuvers with the participation of foreign countries, and we will have international guarantees in terms of security. Germany, Turkey, and other countries that would ask for it. So what did happen? This did not take place. This was destroyed. And they said, okay, let's wait and see how this war is going to evolve. They waited and they saw. So coming to the negotiations with America, after the meetings in Riyadh, we came to the following understanding. The establishment of the dialogue channels covering all topics was what we agreed on. On the other hand, in relation to international issues, the Ukrainian party, of course, America is also going to identify a special representative both on Ukraine and also Middle East. But maybe the most simple side, and this was our proposal, was the normalization of the embassies so that we can revive the embassies in Washington and in Moscow. Last week, we had 2 technical meetings. And this week, we will have comprehensive consultations, and we do hope that we will not have artificial obstacles, and we will see that we will not have democratic obstacles appearing before us. Distinguished colleagues, coming to the questions about BRICS. As you know, Turkey, as a sovereign country, is attaching great importance to international economic cooperation. And in today's world, economic cooperation has to be set on concrete infrastructure. And if you do not have this, you cannot resist economic crisis and you cannot reach your development targets. Therefore, Turkey is attaching great importance to economic cooperation, starting from European Union. So with EU, as you know, we have a long journey of being a full member. But recently, although this is not declared very clearly because of the identity policies of EU, European Union has been experiencing some problems pertaining to including a large Muslim country, and the full membership has come to more or less a frozen status. So nobody is declaring this very clearly, but this is the reality. But we have a balanced export-import relationship. We have commercial relationships that are ongoing, but we have other global economic cooperation platforms that we pay interest in. And our president has a large and extended vision. BRICS is one of them, and we pay interest in this, and our interest has been very close. But as far as we understand, BRICS has a new institutionalization, and they have now frozen their status of new membership, and they have not proposed us a membership status. Therefore, we are following the developments closely. But contrary to the European Union, the composition of BRICS is more comprehensive, and they have various ranks, various religions, various civilizations that covers Muslims, Christians, Hindu, black, white, very different races, ethnics, and religious compositions, and that's the very different compositions. Hopefully, we will see a much more institutionalized and a comprehensive economic initiative. The third question is from Russia Today. Foreign Minister Lavrov, how do you evaluate your future relationship with Damascus? And in relation to your military bases, what is the status of your military bases after the regime change? And of course, you're going to ask the military bases to the Syrian regime and even to the Syrian people whether the American military bases are going to exist there or not. Before the regime change, the American soldiers played a negative role there, and they were in Syrian soil without any legitimate invitation. On the other hand, they continue to be in the most productive soils, both in relation to food production, oil production, and in relation to benefiting from the revenue. And they were selling it through unlawful manner, and they were actually confiscating the income of the Syrian people. So the northeast part was the area where they were more active, and the main aim was actually supporting the Kurdish separatists. Now, how the Syrian regime is going to approach to this issue, how they are approaching to this fact, and also how an assembly where all the Syrian people is going to be represented. This is going to be a new process, and this is going to be about the future of the Syrian people, and of course how all the ethnic and different sects are going to be represented. This is going to be the decision of the Syrian regime. On the other hand, if we see a tendency, we will be evaluating this positively as well. It's not just Damascus. Of course, Foreign Minister Fidan also mentioned in his comments territorial integrity and the unity of Syria is very important. He mentioned this. Syria with the peaceful measures is important. Next question. My question is to Foreign Minister Fidan. Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, mentioned that they're not going to allow Israel forces are not going to be allowed. Netanyahu indicated that Israel soldiers are going to be staying in the Golan Heights for an indeterminate period. Also, Israel is attacking civilians in the West Bank in an increasing manner. What are your assessments about these statements? Distinguished members of the press, Turkey's stance and policy is very clear. Our president is very clear on this position in each and every point, and that is the following. The Palestinians should have their own state, the Israelis should have their own state, and all the countries of the region should live in peace. Nobody should have an attack on the territory of the other. Actually, since the initiation of the Gaza crisis, we initiated that this could be an opportunity. And this two-state solution is now an even more important opportunity. Because if we have a two-state solution, the states of the region is ready to support this. This could be the initiation of the state of Palestine, and the Palestinians would have their own state, and the security guarantees that Israel has been seeking would be provided by the region countries and the international society. But vis-a-vis the developments, what we saw that was Netanyahu government and the developments, they are using the developments for the expansionist policies of Israel. This is the occupation of Lebanon and the West Bank being provocated, being trying to be occupying this area. The Palestinians forced to migrate from Gaza. These are the current plans, but we know for many years now, Israel, for their own security, especially for bordering countries, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, and in all these neighboring countries, the moment they see a weakness, they have a project to create this weakness. And even going beyond this, for the second tier countries, they actually worked closely with the USA so that there is no military power. They feel themselves insecure. They want to have a preventive policy, and the way through this is to have military attacks. And the way to overcome this is actually to have a pressuring policy, and of course to the extent it's possible, they actually use their own power, and if they're not powerful enough, they use the American power. This is the policy they have been following. This policy is a very risky policy, and it is actually a policy that could be creating a pushback from the other side, and it is not a policy that serves to the security of Israel. So our recommendation is, while there is still an opportunity to actually refrain from these suicidal policies to Netanyahu's government and the international society to actually recommend to Netanyahu's government. On the other hand, you believe that you have taken everything under control, but in an unexpected moment, a crisis, a chaos would appear. We hope, while there is chance, they will return back from this policy. Thank you very much.
El derecho a la alimentación, a la vivienda, a un
aquellas hectáreas que no se puedan sembrar serán objeto, utilizaremos parte de estas ayudas al respecto. Segundo gran tema en este debate sobre mercados, fertilizantes. Yo diría que si hay un tema que me preocupa en este momento en una perspectiva de medio-largo plazo es la situación del mercado de los fertilizantes en Europa. En efecto, hemos adoptado una serie de medidas absolutamente necesarias y solidarias. Hoy se cumple el tercer aniversario de la invasión ilegal e injustificada de Ucrania por parte de Rusia y hemos adoptado unas medidas restrictivas respecto de Rusia, que es uno de los grandes productores, junto a Bielorrusia, de fertilizantes en el mundo. El incremento del precio del gas, unido lógicamente al que produce desde el punto de vista del amoníaco y del fosfórico, del gas fosfórico, pues supone un elemento preocupante desde el punto de vista del precio, como lo supone pues el tema evidentemente también de los fosfatos o de las potasas. Por tanto, este es un elemento que debemos intentar resolver a nivel europeo. Es un buen ejemplo también de lo referente a la autonomía estratégica de la Unión Europea, pero claro, tenemos muy poco tiempo.
За столом перемовин навпроти Росії, щоб необхідність миру не була знов заговорена.
Conmemoramos.
Particularmente estamos nosotros desarrollando, Países Bajos también, una iniciativa en materia de la utilización de la fertilización orgánica y de biofertilizantes, pero tenemos que acompasar los tiempos para evitar que, como nos pasó con la guerra de Ucrania al principio, haya una subida muy elevada del precio de fertilizantes que pueda afectar al precio de los alimentos. Y el tercer punto que voy a defender en este debate sobre las cuestiones comerciales es lo que se refiere al sector del vino. Como ustedes saben, el grupo de alto nivel extrajo unas conclusiones a final del mes de diciembre. La Comisión Europea, el otro día me lo comentaba el comisario y ya lo anunció en el Parlamento Europeo, va a presentar medidas concretas en este mes de marzo. Nos parece muy importante. En el caso de España, este año vamos a tener 36,8 millones de hectolitros de producción, es decir, un 15% más. El año pasado exportamos en torno a 3.000 millones de euros, más o menos, de vino. Disminuyó la exportación en volumen, pero aumentó la exportación en valor. Y está claro que estamos con problemas vinculados, digo, a nivel europeo, en ciertas zonas y en ciertos segmentos. Por ejemplo, está habiendo un cambio de tendencia este año y el año pasado. La uva blanca tiene un precio superior a la uva tinta y evidentemente esto significa que hay un cambio de tendencia, yo diría que muy importante. Hay tres temas que tenemos que abordar. Uno es el de la, digamos, resistencia del sector, teniendo en cuenta la situación de los mercados y también la situación del cambio climático. La segunda es cómo ajustar esa oferta y de qué modo a poderlo hacer, y esperamos sugerencias, propuestas de la Comisión Europea. Y finalmente, cómo seguimos las tendencias desde el punto de vista del consumo y nos adaptamos a ellas, y además defendemos, y España lo defiende, repartía fondos hace 2 semanas, menos una semana, a las comunidades autónomas, fondos europeos, justamente para la promoción del vino en mercados terceros. Y tercer punto de discusión hoy, lo que la prueba rural o el rural proofing en inglés, es decir, cómo ajustamos toda la problemática de la elaboración de iniciativas y legislativa de la Unión Europea en relación con el desarrollo de nuestras zonas rurales. Fue el tema del grupo de alto nivel que tuvimos en octubre del año 2023 en Sigüenza, en España, con ocasión de la presidencia española, y de las conclusiones del Consejo que se adoptaron en el mes de noviembre, concretamente el día 20 de noviembre del año 2023. ¿Qué es lo que se trata aquí? Bueno, pues de dos cosas. Primero, que cuando se elabore una directiva o un reglamento se tenga en cuenta también su impacto sobre las zonas rurales. Y en segundo lugar, un tema yo creo que muy importante y muy interesante. Las zonas rurales evidentemente pivotan sobre la producción agroalimentaria, pero también necesitan de servicios públicos y de otros apoyos. Por tanto, la coordinación entre fondos PAC, FEDER, Fondo de Cohesión y otros fondos es absolutamente fundamental. Estos son los 3 puntos básicos que vamos a discutir en el día de hoy y quedo a su disposición.
No sé si hay temor, preparativos por posibles aranceles de Estados Unidos que puedan afectar a los productos agroalimentarios.
Bueno, imagino que este va a ser una pregunta que ya le he respondido en pasados consejos y va de nuevo a continuar estando en el orden del día o en la atención, ¿no? Vamos a ver, yo lo he dicho varias veces y lo quiero repetir hoy. Prudencia y firmeza. Prudencia, porque no tenemos sobre la mesa ninguna indicación por parte de la nueva administración norteamericana, ni tampoco hay por qué tenerla. Nosotros estamos exportando e importando de acuerdo con reglas establecidas internacionalmente y no debería existir ningún problema a este respecto. Si existiera algún problema, tenemos que ser capaces de responder. Y tenemos que ser capaces de responder de acuerdo con nuestras reglas, de acuerdo con nuestros acuerdos y con nuestros principios. Así de complicado, así de sencillo. Yo lo repito siempre, las guerras comerciales son malas, pero particularmente en el sector agroalimentario son aún peores.
Plus de 27 millions sont en besoin d'assistance humanitaire et plus de 2,8 millions de déplacés internes en République démocratique du Congo et particulièrement à l'Est.
Пані та панове, модератор заходу.
Президенте, шановні лідери, шановні учасники, для нас сьогодні велика честь вітати вас в Києві, столиці країни, яка воює в особливий день, треті роковини повномасштабного російського вторгнення на саміті «Підтримуй Україну». Російська агресія почалась понад 11 років тому, і цілі Росії залишаються незмінними. І ви були з нами від перших секунд повномасштабного вторгнення. Ми це дуже цінуємо і ніколи не забудемо. Наші рішення визначають, в якому світі житимуть наші діти. Українські воїни мужньо відстоюють наші спільні інтереси та цінності на полі бою. І ми вдячні нашим надійним союзникам. Ваша підтримка є фундаментально важливою для продовження цієї боротьби. Тепер
Amélioration de la situation des femmes et des enfants.
Porque piense usted que hay no solo una necesidad en un país particularmente como España, pero en general en la Unión Europea, de producir en condiciones climáticas más duras, y las nuevas técnicas genómicas nos permiten tener esto, sino hace unos días veía una investigación en Córdoba concretamente del Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas del Instituto de Desarrollo Sostenible sobre la producción de trigo sin gluten. Necesita esa regulación para poder ser puesto en el mercado. Por tanto, me parece muy importante, pero efectivamente tiene usted razón, se está produciendo un avance a nivel técnico. Vamos a ver si se puede concluir o no. Parece un poco apresurado bajo presidencia polaca, pero nos gustaría que en el diario oficial de la Unión Europea, antes de final de año, consiguiéramos tener ese reglamento que tan importante es para el sector primario.
Ni en la visión de la Comisión ni en la Estrategia Nacional de Alimentación se promueve explícitamente ningún tipo de dietas, se habla de ciertas tendencias respecto a proteínas. No sé cómo ve esa perspectiva que pasa en los dos niveles.
Bueno, soy optimista, pero no tanto. Quiero decir que creo que efectivamente ha recogido muchas cosas, como he dicho antes, en materia de PAC, en materia comercial, sin duda, y en materia de ley de cadena alimentaria de la propuesta española. Es verdad, le comentaba al comisario en Madrid, que esa parte que nosotros hemos incluido entre alimentación y salud, quizás porque no es competencia del comisario Janssen, sino del comisario Varela, pues no se ha incluido explícitamente en esa visión. Pero a mí me parece un elemento fundamental. Tenemos una cuestión básica es la seguridad alimentaria, el abastecimiento, lógicamente vinculado a ello los precios de la alimentación, pero también la producción de los alimentos, sostenibilidad, pero también la calidad alimentaria. Los ciudadanos cada vez reclaman alimentos que estén más vinculados al efecto positivo sobre la salud, y desde ese punto de vista somos imbatibles. Tenemos la dieta mediterránea y tenemos la dieta atlántica. Somos muy completos. Muy bien, sí, perdón.
Entre apoyar de un lado cláusulas espejo y de otro lado el acuerdo con los países del Mercosur?
No, en absoluto, porque lo que estamos haciendo con Mercosur es ampliar las posibilidades, yo diría, comerciales de la Unión Europea, incluso desde el punto de vista agroalimentario, a un mercado de 268 millones de personas, de los cuales 212 viven en Brasil. Es un mercado, además, con una tendencia muy positiva respecto de productos tales como el aceite de oliva o del vino. El aceite de oliva tiene un arancel del 10%, el vino lo tiene del 35%. Por tanto, más que verlo de una forma defensiva, lo tenemos que ver de una forma ofensiva. Tenemos ahí una oportunidad geopolítica y una oportunidad comercial. Y desde el punto de vista de las cláusulas
international relations, where emerging security challenges and geopolitical flux are uniquely impacting on the phenomenon and protection of human rights globally. Notably, the incidences of war and conflict persist, leading to grave violations of human rights, as reflected in the rising cases of crimes against humanity, war crimes and even genocide. The implication is that the Council's crucial role in addressing abuses, preventing conflict, and its emphasis on the need for peace has become more important. Today we are witnessing violent conflicts characterized by indiscriminate attacks on civilian populations, including schools, hospitals, use of sexual and gender-based violence as a weapon of war, rise in violent extremism, dissemination of economic livelihoods, and forced displacements. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in its Global Appeal 2025, projects that over 139 million people globally will be forcibly displaced or become stateless by the end of 2025 due to conflicts. Most of these are vulnerable people from developing countries. Recent reports by UNICEF indicate nearly 47 million children are displaced due to conflict, with the numbers expected to continue increasing. The global organization Save the Children International reports that 1 in 11 children are being denied of their basic rights to live, learn, be protected and prosper due to violent conflict, adverse climate change and global economic instability. Today in Africa, over 2.8 million children are out of school. The wars in Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Libya, Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine, Haiti, Myanmar are some of the notable examples of crises, including Africa's forgotten conflicts. They have been spoken to earlier by other speakers. Kenya continues its active engagement in peace initiatives, both regional and internationally, including in DRC, Sudan, Somalia, and Haiti, among others, because we recognize that sustainable peace is linked to the protection and promotion of human rights. As such, there is a compelling need to fully incorporate human rights considerations in the peace missions and general conflict resolution mechanisms. We believe the Council's work is more vital than ever before, serving as a critical platform for addressing human rights abuses, which are often both a cause and a consequence of conflict. Mr. President, we believe that despite significant challenges, multilateralism remains our most viable option in addressing global issues and promoting human rights. Therefore, in order to maintain its credibility and effectiveness, we must avoid politicization and selective application of standards. The Council should serve as a platform for constructive dialogue, impartial assessment, and collaborative action, fostering genuine progress in the global human rights landscape. Kenya reaffirms its commitment to advocating for marginalized groups, particularly in the face of rising xenophobia, Afrophobia, and racial discrimination. As the current chair rapporteur of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Durban Declaration, Kenya is dedicated to combating racism and related intolerance, welcoming the second International Decade for People of African Descent and its focus on reparatory justice and development. It is important to mention the 2025 AU theme of the year, Justice for Africans and the People of the African Descent through Reparations, a clear demonstration of Africa's commitment to justice, accountability, and the recognition of historical injustices. Kenya commends the Council's crucial work in recognizing the inextricable link between climate change and human rights. We acknowledge the urgent need to address environmental crisis as a recognition of the direct connection between environmental degradation and human rights abuses. Kenya will continue to champion this cause during our tenure on the Council. In this regard, we emphasize the importance of respecting the principles enshrined in the Paris Agreement. We believe that climate finance and the Loss and Damage Fund are critical and represent the bare minimum of what is necessary for a just transition and broader climate justice. We bear witness to the profound impact of climate change in worsening existing vulnerabilities, entrenching marginalization, acting as a threat multiplier, and contributing to instability and conflict in already fragile regions. Mr. President, Kenya recognizes the evolving landscape of human rights challenges in the digital age and is committed to addressing them proactively. We are reviewing our 2014 National Policy and Action Plan on Human Rights to integrate emerging issues, particularly those related to technology and bridging the digital divide. We believe the Council has a crucial role in promoting equitable access to emerging technologies, critical infrastructure and skills necessary for full participation in the information society. We emphasize that bridging the digital divide is essential to prevent technology from worsening existing inequalities. To this end, during our tenure, Kenya aims to advocate for the recognition of access to technology as an essential component of the right to information as enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We welcome all efforts towards ensuring that technology is accessible, affordable, and beneficial for all. Mr. President, we recognize the right to development as a crucial opportunity to foster an environment where every individual and every society can reach their full potential. Kenya will use its position in the Council to advocate for an equitable and democratic international order to serve all humanity. This includes addressing the critical issue of foreign debt and its impact on states' abilities to promote and protect human rights. We believe the Council is uniquely positioned to provide a platform for discussing and advancing reforms in the global financial architecture to ensure greater equity. Mr. President, Kenya's strong adherence to human rights is evident by its membership in most of the key international human rights instruments. The government remains dedicated to their full and effective implementation, which entails both regular reporting to treaty bodies and constructive engagement in dialogue with them. Additionally, Kenya is an active member of the regional human rights mechanisms, including the East Africa Community Court of Justice and Africa Charter on Human People's Rights. Domestically, Kenya has implemented various legal, policy, judicial and other mechanisms to safeguard the enjoyment of these rights by all citizens. In 2010, Kenya established one of the most progressive constitutions in history. Its Chapter 4 is dedicated to the Bill of Rights, which protects fundamental freedoms and rights. This Bill of Rights applies to all people and state organs without discrimination. Kenya is cognizant of the fact that corruption is a threat to human rights. Corruption often facilitates and aggravates human rights violations, particularly against vulnerable groups, by hindering their access to rights and services such as legal representation and a fair trial, property rights, education, health, and social protection. We continue to strengthen institutions, legislation, regulations, and policies to fight corruption, including the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Still, Kenya has upheld its commitment by maintaining a standing invitation for special procedures since 2015 and has consistently accepted requests and responded to recommendations subject to their respective functions. And in recognition of the valuable contribution of civil society organizations, public and national human rights commissions, Kenya actively engages with them through various fora and incorporates their perspectives in its periodic reports. Kenya has extended the arc of human rights protection to vulnerable groups, including refugees, through legislation and policies such as the Shirika Plan, which is a premier refugee integration and management program. Kenya has guaranteed the dignity and economic rights of these victims of forced displacement. Mr. President, in conclusion, as a steadfast champion of the Council and its vital mechanisms, Kenya pledges to continue our proactive engagement on the international stage as we take up our seat in the Council. We reaffirm that human rights remain the cornerstone of our shared humanity, guided by our Constitution and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the bedrock of international human rights standards. Kenya is committed to fostering a just society both at home and globally. We have set a high threshold in protecting and expanding freedom of expression, free press, upholding sanctity of life, countering all forms of violence, including gender-based violence and femicide, amongst others. Our cardinal goal is to contribute to a more just, equitable, and a human rights respecting world for all. I thank you.
Excellence, je vous remercie. Excellence, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous allons à présent observer une brève pause afin de permettre à nos éminences d'inviter Son Excellence le Président de l'Assemblée générale, Son Excellence le Secrétaire général des Nations unies ainsi que l'Haut Commissaire aux droits de l'homme de prendre congé. Je prie respectueusement les délégués de bien vouloir demeurer à leur place quand nous reprendrons immédiatement nos travaux avec l'ouverture du segment de haut niveau. Je vous remercie. Excellencies, can I ask you to take your seats and please this is a very transparent room, which is in the spirit of the Human Rights Council, but we can hear all the voices and all your conversations. So can I ask you again to take your seats and please have your conversations outside of the room. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Ervin Ibrahimovic, Deputy Prime Minister for International Relations and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Montenegro, to take the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to address the Human Rights Council on behalf of Montenegro. I congratulate Ambassador Lauba on his election as President of the Council. I am confident that under his able leadership and the long-standing commitment of the Swiss Confederation to democratic values, the Council will continue to fulfil its core mission of addressing, protecting and promoting human rights worldwide. The Council's proactive role is more crucial than ever. Given another year of horrific armed conflict on an unprecedented scale, from Ukraine and Gaza to the DRC, Sudan, Myanmar and far beyond, with a devastating impact on the lives of millions of people. This is of particular importance on the global backsliding of the human rights as well, compounded by the climate crisis, environmental degradation and unregulated new emerging digital technologies. Such negative development undermine global stability and fuel insecurity, inequality and division. They also clearly point to a crisis in our shared commitment to uphold and respect the fundamental principles of international law and the global norms and standards to which we have all committed ourselves. To effectively address the pressing issues and risks, we must invest more in human rights, not less, and continuously strengthen the rule of law as their vital safeguard. Otherwise, people's lives, peace and stability are at stake. As this postulate shows, problems with the exercise of human rights and freedom are often linked to the cases of tension, instability and political turmoil within and between states. Excellencies, today marks exactly 3 years since the start of the Russian Federation war of aggression against Ukraine. This constitutes a flagrant violation of international law, including the UN Charter, and continues to undermine global stability and erode respect for international law. Russia's brutal aggression has left hundreds of thousands dead and injured, including children, millions displaced, mass destruction across the country, and the list goes on, with mounting evidence of a wide range of violations of international humanitarian and human rights law. Montenegro reaffirms its support for a comprehensive, just and lasting peace based on the principles of the UN Charter and international law. In this regard, the active role of the Ukraine and Europe is indispensable. Excellencies, last year we also witnessed a dramatic military escalation with devastating humanitarian consequences and serious violation of international law in the Middle East and the risk imposed for the entire region. But also some historic events, especially in Syria and Lebanon, where important changes are taking place. Montenegro has welcomed with great hope the ceasefire agreement reached between Israel and Hamas and facilitated by the US, Egypt and Qatar. This significant achievement should allow for the release of all remaining hostages, the cessation of hostilities and the delivery of much-needed humanitarian aid. For this to happen, it is crucial that all parties fully respect the terms of the agreement and ensure its full implementation. Montenegro remains principled in supporting and calling for a just, comprehensive and lasting peace based on a two-state solution with a viable Palestinian state and secure Israel, living side by side in peace, security and mutual recognition. Excellencies, in this time of heightened global conflict and tension and an alarmingly growing trend of disrespect for international law, we must ensure that human rights are at the centre of the response to multiple crises, and reaffirm our strong commitment to effective multilateralism and rules-based international order, with the United Nations at its core, as the Pact for the Future also highlights. Montenegro regrets the decision of the USA administration to withdraw from the HRC, given its vital contribution in protecting and promoting human rights and freedom worldwide. Finally, Excellency, Montenegro has just completed its second mandate of Human Rights Council. We have worked closely with partners from all regional groups to advance the human rights agenda with special focus on vulnerable and marginalised groups. With the same enthusiasm and commitment, Montenegro will continue to be a fair and reliable actor on the Council, as well as to fully cooperate with all EU human rights mechanisms. With that in mind, I am confident in your support for the candidacy of Montenegro, the Human Rights Council for the 2030-2032. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honour to invite His Excellency Mr. Eduardo Rodriguez Parilla, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, to take the floor.
Señor Presidente, el derecho a la vida está en grave peligro. La Carta de las Naciones Unidas, el derecho internacional y el multilateralismo están siendo amenazados. Se pretende imponer la coerción económica y la subversión política como métodos de relacionamiento internacional. Este Consejo debiera abogar con más fuerza por un orden internacional justo y democrático que garantice la paz y el equilibrio del mundo, la igualdad soberana, el ejercicio del derecho al desarrollo por todos los Estados y la sostenibilidad ambiental que aseguren el ejercicio de todos los derechos humanos. Este Consejo es una herramienta importante para la promoción y defensa de los derechos humanos frente a manipulaciones, politización, selectividad o dobles raseros. Urge que todos los Estados asumamos un compromiso real con los mecanismos de derechos humanos de naturaleza temática universal y no discriminatoria. Observamos con suma preocupación el avance de plataformas conservadoras y neofascistas y cómo en países desarrollados se experimenta un retroceso de décadas en derechos fundamentales, incluida la igualdad de la mujer, los derechos sexuales y reproductivos, los derechos de los afrodescendientes, minorías étnicas y migrantes. Los intentos de los países occidentales de convertir este Consejo en un represor contra países que no se subordinan a sus intereses son inaceptables y ponen en peligro su credibilidad y existencia. La nefasta historia de la implosión de la vieja Comisión de Derechos Humanos no debe repetirse. Estados Unidos, cómplice activo del genocidio israelí en Gaza, se cuestiona la permanencia en la agenda del Consejo de un tema prioritario e histórico como es la violación flagrante de los inalienables derechos humanos del pueblo palestino, al que reiteramos toda nuestra solidaridad. El gobierno de los Estados Unidos aplica una política de máxima presión contra Cuba, deteriorando el consumo, los ingresos y el nivel de vida de las familias cubanas. El bloqueo económico provoca inflación, baja disponibilidad de combustibles, alimentos, medicinas y graves daños al servicio eléctrico. Obstaculiza el disfrute pleno de los derechos a la alimentación, la salud, la cultura y la educación que el Estado cubano, con gran esfuerzo, provee de manera gratuita o subsidiada. Agradecemos a los 123 estados que en julio pasado se pronunciaron en este Consejo contra la inclusión de Cuba en la espuria lista del Departamento de Estado sobre países que supuestamente patrocinan el terrorismo. Recientemente se ha divulgado copiosa evidencia sobre la práctica del gobierno de los Estados Unidos de dedicar fondos millonarios del presupuesto federal a través de entidades como la USAID y la NET a financiar organizaciones, medios de prensa, laboratorios de inteligencia.
Completely unprovoked. We fought two existential wars against Russia. The first one was the winter war. It lasted only 105 days, and we were able to hold the line. The second one was the war of continuation, which lasted pretty much 1,100 days. And that's what you've been going through right now. And essentially, for me, this war is about the existence of nationhood in Ukraine. And that nationhood is based on a triangle. And that triangle is something that we thought would be respected ever since the end of World War II. And that is independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Now, in World War II, Finland had to accept a peace with Stalin. And I'm sure we're going to have to accept a peace with Putin. But the peace that we accepted had only one out of the three statehood principles in it: independence. We were the only country bordering the Soviet Union that was able to retain our true independence. But we lost our sovereignty. You know, we couldn't decide the clubs we wanted to join. We were able to join the EU only when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1995. And we lost 10% of our territory, including the areas where my grandparents were born and where my father was born. Now, the only reason I'm saying this is that the support that you will see from the Finnish public, and I think from all around this table, is the support of identity and historical experience. Now, my big point is that there seems to be some misunderstanding about what is going on here. Russia obviously started this war, but remember that it started this acquisition of territory and spheres of interest already in 2008 by attacking Georgia, and then in 2014 by annexing the Crimean Peninsula. And then at the end of the day, we are now here to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of the beginning of the full-scale war, but the war has been going on for pretty much 11 years, ever since 2014. And a lot of people don't understand that this is not only about Ukraine, but this is also about Europe. This is also about the United States. This is also about international law. And at the end of the day, it's about the world order. So if we now allow Russia to do what it wants to do, in other words, stop the existence of a Ukrainian state, then it's not only Ukraine that has lost, it's Europe that's lost, it's the West that has lost, and also the United States that has lost. And for those who doubt about this, let me say one thing very clearly. You cannot trust Putin. You cannot make a deal with Putin, because that means basically a deal also with China. I also say that for those who doubt, the only way in which Ukraine is going to fully win this war is that we continue the support that we have given you from the beginning. And I also say that if Russia gets what it wants now, trust me, it's not going to stop with Ukraine. We know that Putin will continue because his mind is one of imperialism and spheres of interest. So self-evidently, Finland will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We're the 5th biggest donor, GDP per capita. Let me finish off, however, by saying that I think in the past 2 weeks, we've been sort of a little bit lost. A new American administration has come in, and we have heard conflicting messages. I believe that we need to take the initiative back. And by that I mean to say that there needs to be something concrete on the proposal, on the table. So let me propose today something that I've spoken with you about and with many around the table. It's not a peace plan, but it's a sketch of a process. And that process, in my mind, goes very simply in 3 phases. The first phase is before the actual ceasefire. This is the phase when we put maximum pressure on Russia, including sanctions, including using the frozen assets, and of course, including continuing the military support for Ukraine. This is also the time when I think European leaders need seriously talk about security arrangements. And of course, the lead comes from Ukraine. You have the biggest land force and most experienced land force in Europe. But there needs to be support from Europe, and the backstop needs to come from the United States. All of this needs to be settled before a ceasefire is brokered, whether that's Easter or whenever, we don't know. The second phase is the ceasefire phase. And the ceasefire basically means that there's a contact line, probably monitoring thereof, but it also means that 2 things are put into place. First is a negotiation on the actual agenda and modalities of the peace process, because there is no peace process, there is no agenda, there are no modalities. And the second one is, of course, confidence-building measures, which were mentioned here a little bit earlier, exchange of prisoners, returning the kidnapped children, etc., etc. This is the second phase. Then only begins the third phase. And we're far, far, far from it. And that is the actual peace process. That's when there is conversation about territory. That's when there is conversation about reconstruction. And that's when there is conversation about unraveling the sanctions. Having said all of that, very conditional, by the way, having said all of that, I think we need to make clear to the Russians and everyone else that there are a few things that are completely off the table in these negotiations. One is EU membership. It is not Russia who decides on EU membership. It is the European Union who does that. Two is NATO. It is not Russia that decides on NATO membership. It is the alliance itself. Three is Ukrainian defense. It is not Russia that decides on what Ukraine has by its border, when, where, and how. And four, European security arrangements or order. It's not Russia that decides on that. We already have a European security order and should stick to it. So those are off the table. And let me just finish off, because I do think this is such an important day, and I was watching all the colleagues on Maidan Square and the rest of it. But I do think this is a day when we have to honor the fallen Ukrainian heroes. I also believe that this is a day where we have to face the fact that Putin has lost this war, in a sense that we will see a European Ukraine, we will see eventually Ukraine in NATO, we've seen a unified European Union, and hopefully a stronger transatlantic alliance in the long run. And on a day like this, I think it's time to pave the way for a plan for Ukrainian victory. Slava Ukraini.
Дякуємо, пане президенте. А зараз я радий запросити до виступу його високоповажність пана Діка Схоофа, прем'єр-міністра Королівства Нідерланди. Нідерланди є важливим партнером України. Ваше лідерство поза конкуренцією, особливо важливим є ваш внесок у підвищення безпеки нашого неба. Прошу, пане прем'єр-міністре.
Thank you. Mr. President, dear Vladimir, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. One of my first international trips after I became Prime Minister of the Netherlands last summer was to Zaporizhzhia, was to Ukraine. It was an experience I will never forget. I spoke to veterans, I visited an underground school, and I saw with my own eyes the devastating impact of war. But what struck me above all was the bravery and the resilience of the Ukraine armed forces and the Ukrainian people. For 3 years now, you have resisted the most brutal and fierce attacks by the Russian aggressor. Fighting for freedom, fighting for independence, fighting for the right to shape your own future. The government and people of the Netherlands admire you greatly for that. The purpose of that first visit was very clear: to reaffirm that the Netherlands stand with Ukraine and that we will continue to do so. But today, I can only repeat that message, also on behalf of His Majesty the King. Ukraine can count on our unwavering military, financial, and political support, now and after the war, when justice must be done and Ukraine must recover. So it's good to see so many of you today. It shows that support for Ukraine remains strong and widespread. Today marks the start of the 4th year of the terrible war. Let us hope that it also marks the beginning of the end. In the past few turbulent weeks, we have been face to face with history. None of us can predict what will happen over the next few weeks and months. But whatever that may be, for the Netherlands, there can only be one outcome. And that is a just and lasting peace, both for Ukraine and for Europe. That means a peace that not only ends hostilities here and now, but also guarantees a safe future. That's why it's so important that Ukraine remains strong on the battlefield. Because we need peace through strength and not the enduring threat of war through weakness. And furthermore, it's crucial that your voice and our voices are heard in the negotiation process. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Nothing about Europe without Europe. Thank you, Vladimir, for inviting us to this summit. Thank you all for attending and showing your support. Let's keep working together towards the best possible outcome. Thank you, and Slava Ukraine.
І мені дуже приємно запросити до слова його високоповажність пана Джастіна Трюдо, прем'єр-міністра Канади. Канада займає особливе місце в серцях українців. Позиція Канади в групі G7 з початку повномасштабного вторгнення і, зокрема, у 2025 році під час канадського головування має важливе значення для успіху нашої боротьби. Прошу, пане прем'єр-міністре.
Bonjour, mes chers amis. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to my fellow leaders for your timely and salient remarks. And above all, thank you, Volodymyr, for hosting today's summit and for your courageous leadership as the duly elected democratic leader of this great nation. Since the start of Russia's full-scale illegal war of aggression 3 years ago, you've shown remarkable personal bravery, resilience, and resolve, a defiant spirit mirrored by the unbreakable Ukrainian people. You continue to inspire me and tens of millions of my fellow citizens back home in Canada. But let us be frank, you and the Ukrainian people should never have had to endure even a single day of this unjustified, brutal war, let alone 1,096 of them, or more accurately, over 4,000 of them since Russia illegally seized Crimea back in 2014. This is not a conflict Ukraine wanted, provoked, or asked for in any way. This is a war started for one reason and one reason only: Russia's desire to erase Ukrainian history and expand their empire. Russia's actions are nothing short of a direct attack against the rules-based international order, an order established in response to the most destructive war in our collective history, a war etched in the memory of the citizens of all of our respective nations for the past 80 years. An order which, albeit imperfect, ushered in the most peaceful and prosperous era in the history of humanity. We cannot go back. We cannot return to an era where might makes right. We must do everything in our power to enable Ukraine to secure a just and lasting peace, a peace that cannot be achieved without Ukrainians at the table. That is precisely what Canada is focused on. Canada has been a steadfast, unshakable partner to Ukraine since the beginning, and that will never, ever change. Le Canada est fier du travail qu'on a accompli avec vous tous autour de cette table pour faire que la Russie paye le prix de cette invasion inhumaine, que ce soit avec des sanctions ou en offrant aux Ukrainiens de l'aide humanitaire, financière et militaire dont ils ont besoin pour se défendre et faire obstacle au régime russe. But I know, we all know, there is more work to do. That is why I am announcing Canada will be providing 25 more LAV-3 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. We will be delivering 2 armored combat support vehicles which Ukrainian forces will be trained on shortly in Germany. Landing systems for F-16s were delivered just 2 months ago, and 4 F-16 flight simulators will be provided in the coming months. And that's on top of the millions of additional rounds of ammunition, components for drone cameras, and first aid kits. We're also dispersing the first installment of the $5 billion in assistance to Ukraine funded through revenues from frozen Russian assets, along with providing a grant to help Ukraine maintain its energy security in the wake of consistent, reckless attacks by Russia on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Throughout all this, we need to keep in mind the size of the human cost of the Russian aggression for the past 3 years. Ukrainians who've lost their lives fighting courageously for their land, children taken from their families and homes and communities, which is a disgusting war crime, and violence subjected to prisoners of war taken by Russia. Implementing the Montreal Pledge to address the human costs of the war, a declaration made at the conference we co-hosted there last autumn with Norway and Ukraine, is more urgent than ever. We will continue to work with Ukrainian forces through Operation Unifier, which has already trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. And once a just peace is secured, Canada stands at the ready to work with our partners around the world to provide Ukraine the security it needs for the peace to last, allowing it to recover, rebuild, and prosper. Regardless of the great distance separating our two countries, Canada knows this is a war that we cannot afford to ignore. I know the stakes. Canadians know the stakes. All of you around this table know the stakes. And most of all, Ukrainians know the stakes. This is a war of aggression on Ukraine's people, culture, identity, and very existence. But it's also a war on our way of life. It's a war on democracy, on the rule of law, on self-determination, a war on justice, and a war on truth. At this critical moment, I think of the words of the great Ukrainian poet, Taras Shevchenko, whose works have been echoed by millions of Ukrainians as a source of inspiration. You must fight on, you will triumph. God is helping, leading. At your back are justice, glory, and sacred freedom. That excerpt was proudly recited in Independence Square by Serhiy Nihoyan, the first martyr of the Revolution of Dignity, shortly before he was killed. And 11 years later, it continues to ring true. Ukrainians will triumph because Ukrainians are fighting for what is right. But they cannot and should not do it alone. It's up to all of us in this room and around the world to meet this moment as well. And we can't wait. The moment to stop this war of aggression, the moment to defend democracy, the moment to stand for our shared values is now. So let us seize it. Merci beaucoup, mes amis. Slava Ukraini.
Дякуємо, шановний пане прем'єр-міністре. А зараз я хотів би передати слово його високоповажності пану Реджепу Таїпу Ердогану, президенту Турецької Республіки. Туреччина залишається непохитним і впливовим прихильником українського суверенітету, територіальної цілісності. Ми це надзвичайно цінуємо.
Değerli dostum, Sayın Zelenski, kıymetli Ukraynalılar, sevgili Kırım Türk'ü soydaşlarımız, saygıdeğer katılımcılar, sizlere en kalbi duygularımla, saygıyla selamlıyorum. Video mesaj yoluyla da olsa sizlere hitap etmekten memnuniyet duyuyorum. Savaşın 3. yılını doldurduğumuz bu acı günde ülke ve millet olarak dost Ukrayna halkının yanında olduğumuzu öncelikle ifade etmek istiyorum. Geçtiğimiz 3 sene zarfında topraklarını savunurken hayatlarını kaybeden Ukraynalılar için taziye dileklerimi iletiyor, yakınlarına başsağlığı diliyorum. Türkiye 2014 yılında Kırım'ın ilhakından bu yana uluslararası hukukun temel ilkeleri doğrultusunda Ukrayna'nın haklı davasına gereken desteği vermiştir. Bundan 3 sene önce çatışmalar başladığında savaşa karşı olduğumuzu nasıl ilan ettiysek, bugün de savaşın müzakereler vasıtasıyla sonlandırılması için her türlü gayreti göstermeye kararlıyız. Bunu yaparken Ukrayna'nın toprak bütünlüğü, egemenliği ve bağımsızlığına olan güçlü desteğimizi sürdürüyoruz. Savaş 4. yılına girerken diplomasiyi, diyaloğu ve müzakereleri temel alan yaklaşımların ivme kazandığını görmekteyiz. Bu sürecin çatışmaların sonlandırılmasının ve kalıcı barışın tesisinin başlangıcı olmasını umut ediyoruz. En başından beri savunduğumuz üzere adil ve kalıcı barışa giden yol ancak ve ancak savaşın her iki tarafının da eşit ve hakkaniyetli bir şekilde temsil edildiği bir denklemle açılabilir. Sayın Zelenski ile geçtiğimiz hafta Ankara'da Türkiye'nin bu önemli kavşakta sağlayabileceği katkıları ve müzakerelere ev sahipliği yapma istediğini de ele aldık. Şunu tüm samimiyetimle ifade etmek isterim. Gelecek sene savaşın değil, barışın yıl dönümünü idrak etmek için hepimize önemli sorumluluklar düşüyor. Türkiye olarak adil ve kalıcı barışın tesisi için tüm gücümüzle çalışmaya devam edeceğiz. Bu düşüncelerle 2025'in barışın inşa edileceği bir yıl olmasını canı gönülden temenni ediyorum. Birkaç gün sonra kavuşacağımız Ramazan-ı Şerif'in tüm insanlığa barış, huzur ve esenlik getirmesini Rabbimden niyaz ediyorum. Hepinize saygı ve selamlarımı gönderiyorum. Kalın sağlıcakla.
Дякуємо. І зараз я радий запросити до виступу її високоповажність пані Карін Келлер-Зутер, президента Швейцарської конфедерації. Швейцарія відіграла важливу роль у просуванні глобального бачення всеохоплюючого, справедливого та сталого миру для України та Європи. Будь ласка.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Switzerland, I would like to thank you for the invitation to this summit. Let me start by expressing my heartfelt vicinity to the Ukrainian people who have endured another terrible year of suffering and war. For the last 3 years, Switzerland has been calling on Russia to immediately cease all hostilities and withdraw its troops from the territory of Ukraine. And we reiterate this call today. With the Ukraine Peace Summit last year in Switzerland, the goal was to lay the groundwork for peace talks and revitalize existing peace efforts. We remain steadfast in our support towards a just and lasting peace. It is clear to us that a durable solution can't be achieved without Ukraine. This war has global long-term effects. Therefore, we remain committed to working closely with our partners in Europe and beyond for a peaceful future for Ukraine and the entire continent. Ukraine has become one of the most heavily mined countries. This is not only a threat to lives, but also to food security in Ukraine and in the world. Last year, Switzerland hosted the Ukraine Mine Action Conference. More than 40 countries signed the Lausanne Call for Action, committing to concrete actions towards humanitarian demining in Ukraine. Switzerland also stands with Ukraine by providing humanitarian aid and supporting reconstruction. 2 weeks ago, the Swiss Federal Council approved a country program of 1.5 billion euro for Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction over the next 4 years. Switzerland has welcomed Ukrainian refugees, providing them with protection and support. Excellencies, in 2026, Switzerland will chair the OSCE. We will continue to work with all of you to contribute to peace and security in Europe. On this day, our thoughts are with all those who have suffered and continue to endure hardship due to this war. Let me reaffirm Switzerland's commitment to supporting Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction efforts and to working towards a future of peace, stability and justice. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. А зараз я маю особливу приємність передати слово його високоповажності пану Антоніо Кошті, президенту Європейської ради. Дуже дякуємо вам за ваше особисте лідерство і непохитну підтримку.
Thank you. dear Volodymyr, people of Ukraine, dear colleagues, excellencies. 3 years ago, Russia launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine, a Russian war of aggression that was unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal. A war that violates Ukraine's sovereignty, its territorial integrity, its international recognized borders, and the fundamental principles of international law enshrined in the United Nations Charter. My thoughts are with all Ukrainians, with all those who have lost a family member and friend, with those who are wounded. The suffering Russia has inflicted in Ukraine is cruel and unjustifiable. The presence of all of us here today is a demonstration of our solidarity with people of Ukraine and with you, President Zelensky. We were here with you from day one. We stand and we will stand with you side by side, shoulder to shoulder, in the war, in future peace negotiations, in the reconstruction, and as a member state of the European Union. We all want this war to end and the suffering and destruction to stop. This is why this moment is so important. Russia is a threat to the international rules-based order. Putin wants to divide us, and we show here today that our support is strong, united, and unchanged. There will be no credible and successful negotiation, no lasting peace without Ukraine and without the European Union. Only Ukraine can decide when the conditions are met to start a peace negotiation. Peace cannot be a simple ceasefire. It needs to be a durable agreement. Peace should not reward the aggression. We need to learn the message from the past, from the Budapest and Minsk agreements. Only concrete and strong security guarantees will ensure a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine and in Europe as a whole. The European Union is ready to do whatever it takes for its security and to continue to support Ukraine. That is why I'm convening a special European Council next week on the 6th of March on supporting Ukraine and strengthening Europe's defense. Working very close with the European Commission and with Ursula, we are ready to effectively deliver on our defense capabilities and to significantly invest on it. We are ready to increase our financial and military support to Ukraine. And we are ready to build Ukraine's future within the European Union. Ukraine, you can count on us, and Slavia Ukrainia.
Дуже дякуємо. Сьогодні ми маємо честь слухати не лише промови і виступи світових лідерів, а також матимемо честь почути і наших мужніх воїнів з передової. І зараз для мене особливо приємно і почесно надати слово відважним воїнам 93-ї окремої механізованої бригади «Холодний Яр», які боронять нашу батьківщину на Покровському напрямку. Головний сержант батальйон безпілотних систем Денис Кардаш. Прошу до слова.
Вітаю всіх, слава Україні! Сьогодні до 11-ї річниці початку агресії на території України Російської Федерації і до третьої річниці великого наступу повномасштабної війни Росії з Україною, хотілося б подякувати всім європейським лідерам та країнам, які нас підтримують у цій війні, йдуть разом з нами до перемоги. Зараз ми, бійці 93-ї бригади батальйону безпілотних систем Black Raven, знаходимося на бойових позиціях, виконуємо бойові завдання на найгарячіших напрямках нашої країни. Це Покровський напрямок, це напрямок Бахмутський. Наші підрозділи виконують завдання з прикриття неба, знищення ворога і підтримки нашої піхоти на всіх цих напрямках. Лише протягом останніх днів наша бригада відбила десятки атак агресора, які хотіли захопити нашу вільну Україну. Нашим батальйоном безпосередньо за ці декілька днів було знищено біля 30 єдиниць техніки та засобів ураження, які агресор кожен день застосовує в нашу сторону. І близько 50 окупантів було знищено на наших напрямках за ці 2 дні. Лише чимало, я знаю також, що чимало країн є, які нам допомагають, пройшли через такий ж самий агресію зі сторони Росії і знають, що це таке, як це відбувається. Хочу нагадати всім, хто може не до кінця розуміє, що це таке, що війна, вона приходить несподівано і ніхто до неї ніколи не готується. І це дуже погано. Чи важко нам зараз тут? Важко. Неймовірно важко. Чи хочемо, чи втомилися ми від війни? Втомилися. Так, але це битва за нашу незалежність, це битва за наших рідних, це битва за нашу сім'ю і за нашу країну і за нашу націю. Якщо ми програємо цю битву, то в нас цього всього не буде. Не буде майбутнього у наших родин і наших дітей. Хочу подякувати всім странам, які підтримують нас, всім народам, людям, які підтримують нашу боротьбу. Хочу подякувати всім волонтерам. Це українські волонтери, це наші люди, це волонтери інших стран, які допомагають сильно, допомагають і реагують дуже швидко, тому що війна йде кожен день і вона дуже жорстока. Хочу подякувати всім воїнам, які зараз захищають нашу країну. Це воїни, як українські, так і іностранні воїни, які приїхали допомогти нам стати вільними. Дякую всім. Слава Україні, слава нації і вічна пам'ять всім загиблим героям, які захищали нашу страну від російської агресії. Дякую.
Дякуємо нашим мужнім воїнам за героїзм. І зараз маю честь запросити до виступу його високоповажність пана Еді Раму, прем'єр-міністра Республіки Албанія. Цінуємо непохитну і дієву підтримку вашої країни і ваше лідерство. Дякуємо.
Thank you very much, and thank you for especially including me and Albania here. I'm aware that I am the tallest of all of you, but I represent a country that is maybe irrelevant in this state when it comes to manpower and when it comes to military power and all this. I cannot but fully agree with everything that was said, and I don't want to waste anyone's time by repeating the fundamentals that all the friends and the colleagues around the table have underlined. However, I cannot prevent myself to raise a question because it seems to me, following the whole meeting, that nothing has happened. It seems to me that this meeting is like a registration of a meeting 3 months ago, or a year ago, or 2 years ago. But I'm not sure that is the case, and I think that something important has happened, as you all know. And the question is how Ukraine will be supported efficiently, and how much we can be, all of us, but again, I apologize because I know that here it's about EU first, it's about other big countries and not about Albania, but how Europe as a continent can be efficient in protecting itself and in making the best out of something that is going on, a negotiation between Russia and the United States. And I'm not sure that just talking about increasing military support and increasing military spending, we get the whole point. But this is my humble opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. And what I just shared yesterday with Volodymyr in our conversation, I want to share with you that, in my understanding, Europe as a continent need to have a long trench of diplomacy, including Great Britain, of course, Turkey, European Union, by no doubt, and have a position. Have a position, because I'm afraid that it will be unsustainable with the public opinions, especially in the western side of the continent, to continue and just say what we are saying here, but in the meantime, looking US and Russia striking a deal and Ukraine being cut out or being imposed something that may be totally unjust. So we have been for a long time in the American autopilot. Now the autopilot seemingly is off. Nobody knows for how long. And I believe that it's time to have a deeper reflection than just what we will do in terms of military support or military spending. Because it for sure is very necessary, but might not be enough. And so with all this being said, I repeat, no doubt that we are fully behind Ukraine, no doubt that we are fully behind any decision the grown-ups in this space will make, but some doubts about the fact that here we are talking just about half of the story and not of the other half, and we are dealing just about half of the problem, which is the military side, and not the other half, which is the politics and the diplomacy of it, has to be shared. And I apologize again. I'm very much aware that the relevance of my country is not as big as to change anything, but just some food for thought, because I'm afraid that if this thing will go on like this, sooner more than later, especially the Western countries will have to face public opinions that may bring things to a total collapse of the democratic forces. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. І зараз я радий запросити до виступу його високоповажність пана Сігеру Ісібу, прем'єр-міністра Японії. Японія – друг і союзник. Японія дуже добре розуміє, що Росія насправді ніколи не закінчує своєї війни. 2025 рік – це час, коли ми визнаємо, що безпека європейського та індотихоокеанського регіонів нероздільні і діємо відповідно. Прошу, пане прем'єр-міністре.
I am Ishiba Shigeru, the Prime Minister of Japan. Today marks 3 years since the start of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We strongly condemn the ongoing Russian attacks and once again express our admiration for the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people who are standing up against the aggression. Furthermore, it is very meaningful that discussions on supporting Ukraine are being held at today's meeting, and I would like to pay my utmost respect for Ukraine's initiative in hosting this meeting. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is an outrageous act that shakes the very foundation of the international order. Such unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force must not be tolerated anywhere in the world. With this in mind, Japan has strongly provided support to Ukraine and has imposed sanctions on Russia since the beginning of the aggression.
Currently, various diplomatic efforts are ongoing to achieve peace. We hope that these efforts will lead to an end to the prolonged combat and help achieve a breakthrough in this difficult situation. That is my fervent expectation. Having said so, in considering how to end this aggression, the party in question, Ukraine must engage, and a just and lasting peace should materialize as soon as possible. Toward this end, we must unite and work together. Our stance of supporting Ukraine will remain steadfast. Japan continues to work with Ukraine to restore peace to the beautiful land of Ukraine. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. А зараз я з особливою приємністю запрошую до слова її високопані Урсулу фон дер Ляйн, її високоповажність, президентку Європейської комісії. Дякуємо за ваше особисте лідерство, за ваші одні з перших візитів в Україну і за демонстрацію справжньої підтримки і нашим людям, і нашій країні. Дякуємо.
Thank you very much, dear Volodymyr, fellow leaders, people of Ukraine. The 24th of February 2022 is a day that will live forever in infamy. And today we join you in commemoration of the fallen hero of Ukraine and those who are still fighting at the front line, as we have just heard. A peaceful nation was invaded with no reason except Putin's imperial obsession. But we believe in a free and a sovereign Ukraine on the path towards the European Union, and we join you in shaping this future together. The war in Ukraine remains the most central and consequential crisis for Europe's future. Putin is trying harder than ever to win the war on the ground. His goal remains Ukraine's capitulation, and we know what could happen next, because it has already happened before. It is not only the destiny of Ukraine that is at stake, it is Europe's destiny that is at stake. So our first priority remains to empower Ukraine's resistance. And so far, the European Union and the member states have supported Ukraine to the tune of 135 billion euros. That is more than anybody else. Thanks to our Ukraine facility and the G7 loan, we have closed Ukraine's budgetary gap for the entire year of 2025. Now, in parallel, we must speed up the immediate delivery of weapons and ammunition, and this will be at the heart of our work in the coming weeks. Today, I'm here with the whole College of Commissioners of the European Commission to mark our wholeheartedly support for Ukraine. A free and sovereign Ukraine is not only in the European interest, but it is in the interest of the whole world, because the autocrats around the world are watching very carefully whether there's any impunity if you violate international borders or invade your neighbor, or if there is true deterrence. This is not only paramount for Europe, it is also important for Asia, for Africa, and for both sides of the Atlantic. An investment in Ukraine's sovereignty is an investment in the prevention of future wars. And there is more in for Europe and the world. Ukraine has a highly innovative and thriving defense industry. This should never fuel the arsenals of an aggressive power, but it should strengthen the resilience of a European Union with Ukraine as its member that is taking on more responsibility for its own security. Ukraine has a lively startup scene with a lot of experience in the rising sectors like artificial intelligence and drones. The can-do attitude and the entrepreneurial spirit of young and dynamic Ukrainian companies can provide important impulses to Europe's competitiveness. Dear Volodymyr, Europe is here to strengthen Ukraine in this critical moment. I can announce that a new 3.5 billion euro payment for Ukraine will arrive already in March. Second, as President Costa just has announced, there will be a special European Council, and I will present at this special European Council a comprehensive plan for defense investment, for scaling up our European arms production and defense capabilities, but also for investment in Ukraine's defense industry, scaling up your arms production, your defense capabilities. So this will be a plan for the European Union and for Ukraine. And then there's a third point I want to speak about. That is energy. For 3 years, Russia has sought to plunge Ukraine into darkness by relentlessly targeting the energy infrastructure. Therefore, the Commission has prepared an ambitious package on energy security. The aim is to ensure a resilient, a secure, competitive energy system for Ukraine. Together, we have managed during this winter already to provide 1.8 gigawatt. But now we will fully integrate Ukraine's and Moldova's electricity market in our own electricity market by the end of next year. And we will seize the full potential of Ukraine's vast gas storages, of which 80% are located closer to the EU member states, and this will generate income for Ukraine. And we will accelerate investment in Ukraine's renewable energy. All these efforts will result in greater energy security for both the European Union and Ukraine. Finally, no one wants more peace than the Ukrainian people. But they want a just and a lasting peace. And this only comes through strength. And this is why we strengthen your economy. This is why we increase the resilience of your energy sector. This is why we will continue training and equipping your troops. Think of the importance of artillery ammunition, for example. This is why we have to provide security guarantees backed by the United States. This is why today we are adopting the 16th package of sanctions. We will increase punitive sanctions against Russia until they demonstrate true willingness to achieve a lasting peace agreement. We stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes. I cannot wait for the moment, after having listened also to your soldier at the front line, till we start to reconstruct Ukraine again, Ukraine as a member of the European Union. Slava Ukraini. Thank you so much.
Дуже дякуємо. А зараз маю честь надати слово її високоповажності пані Роберті Мецолі, президентці Європейського парламенту. Роль Європейського парламенту надзвичайно важлива і відіграє важливу роль у боротьбі з російською агресією.
Thank you very much, dear Volodymyr, dear colleagues, dear friends. We were with Ukraine on that day, 3 years ago. We are with Ukraine today, and we will be with you tomorrow. What matters now, however, is not just what we say. It is what we do. The coming days and weeks will shape our future, not through words, but through the actions we take right here in Europe. Peace without liberty is not peace. Europe knows this. We will always seek peace, but it must be just, it must be real, and it must be dignified. And it must be based on the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Because the concept of might is right will not define the new world order. It cannot. For 3 years, Europe has stood with you, and let me be clear, we will not waver. I will never forget those moments in Kiev at the start of the invasion when the world saw you all stand up. The European Parliament has been united from day one. And together with President von der Leyen and President Costa, we will speak with one voice, because we understand that together we are strongest. But now we must do more. Ukraine must be in a position of strength, because that is the only path to real peace and liberty. That means Europe must step up without delay, militarily, financially, as we've just heard, and diplomatically. We must move forward with using frozen Russian assets, tightening sanctions, and increasing pressure. And we must get serious about our own defense, and fast. Let's be clear, Ukraine's fight is Europe's fight. This is not just an attack on Ukraine. It is an attack on democracy, on our way of life, on everything we stand for. The Ukrainians on the front lines are holding the line for all of us. So as Ukraine enters the 4th year of this war, we must stay the course. We must cut through the noise. We must keep our eyes on our shared objective, freedom for Ukraine and lasting peace for all of Europe and the world. Slava Ukraini.
Дуже дякуємо. І зараз я радий надати слово її високоповажності пані Майі Санду, президентці Республіки Молдова. Молдова є критично важливим партнером у забезпеченні безпеки та стабільності регіону. Будь ласка.
Thank you. Dear President Zelensky, ladies and gentlemen, I remember that morning 3 years ago, 4 a.m., I read the news in horror. I got up, went to the office, and from there, I heard the bombs exploding. Odessa, or maybe Vinica. At that moment, we didn't know where the next bomb would fall. But we know this now. Ukraine's courage has kept Moldova safe and at peace. The bravery and sacrifice of the Ukrainian people shielded us from war. We will always be grateful. We will never forget. 3 years on, Russia's brutal, criminal war continues. The Kremlin's aggression has brought suffering and devastation on a scale Europe has not seen since World War II. Just yesterday, Ukraine endured the largest drone attack since the start of the war. Russia is not looking for peace, yet the world speaks of peace. But peace must be just, lasting, and real. A flawed peace, one that ignores Ukraine's security or sidelines Europe, will not end the threat. It will only delay it. A fake peace, one that lets Putin regroup, rearm, and invade again, is not peace. That is why we must stand together. Russia's goal is division between allies, between countries, within societies. Instead, we must stand united. Security guarantees are key to making sure history does not repeat itself, that Putin can never deceive the world again, that Russia will no longer bring death to other nations. The world needs real security guarantees, clear, strong, and enforceable. Moldova supports these efforts. We stand with Ukraine in securing concrete guarantees that will ensure lasting peace. We support measures that strengthen Ukraine's security and prevent future aggression. This is not just about Ukraine. It is about all of us. And let me be clear, Putin would not stop at Ukraine. That is why our response must be firm, our support unwavering, because Ukraine is not just fighting for itself, it is fighting for all of us. And while Ukraine stands, Moldova stands, Europe stands. Let us make sure we're standing up, not standing by. Moldova stands with Ukraine, Moldova stands with freedom, and together we will spare no effort for real peace to prevail. Slava Ukraini!
Дякуємо, пані президент. А тепер з особливою приємністю я надаю слово її високоповажності пані Мете Фредеріксен, прем'єр-міністру Данії. Данія встановлює високі стандарти щодо послідовності та інноваційності підтримки України. Данська модель підтримки військово-промислового комплексу України є ініціативою, яка має стратегічне значення та довготривалий ефект для нашої боротьби. Ми потребуємо лідерства Данії. Прошу.
Those who say that we are in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. So it was said many years ago, and dear friends, today gathered here in Kiev, we don't have to look very far to see the heroes of our time. Dear Volodymyr, you and your countrymen have been fighting now for 3 long years, a full-scale war of aggression started by Russia. You have defended not only your own country, but all of Europe, and I believe that none of us present in this room are able to put into words how grateful we are. But then we can show it in action. And therefore I have 3 key messages today. Firstly, I strongly urge every European country to increase support for Ukraine. Not tomorrow, but today. Remove all self-imposed red lines, scale up military and financial assistance, and support production directly in Ukraine. Conditions for peace are to be set through strength, and I think that is the single most important task for Europe right now. Secondly, a ceasefire without a sustainable peace will cause a lot of danger to all of us. It will give Russia room to rebuild and to rearm, and to relaunch an attack on Ukraine or another European country. I have never believed that this war is primarily about Ukraine. You are paying the price for it, but this war is about Russia. It's about the imperial dreams, and therefore I find it very difficult to trust Putin and to trust Russia. And it goes without saying that nothing should be negotiated without Ukraine, not only at the table, but in the center of the table, of course. Thirdly, we need to ensure Ukraine has a real and strong security guarantee. NATO membership is, of course, the strongest security guarantee. It is the easiest way forward, it's the cheapest way forward. I know that some allies are against this, and therefore I ask the question, if we cannot give you membership of NATO, and I think it's the only way forward, then we have to find another way to provide Ukraine with a clear, long-term security guarantee. Let me just conclude by saying that the best things about heroes is that they always win at the end. And if they aren't winning, then it's not the end. I said to you 3 years ago that Denmark stands with you all the way, and we will never go away from that point of view. We have to stand with Ukraine, and we have to stand with our continent. Therefore, I think we have to scale up as Europeans. We have to speed up to be able to protect ourselves and deter when it comes to Russia. And 3% will not be enough. It's simply not enough. My guess is that we have a couple of months to take all necessary decisions. Otherwise, we'll be too late. And being too late cannot be the conclusion. So it's time to stand up for Ukraine, and it's time to stand up for Europe. Slava Ukraini.
Дуже дякуємо. Тепер я запрошую до виступу її високоповажність пані Міріам Спітері де Боно, президентку Республіки Мальта. Ми вдячні вам за вашу підтримку.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. Today we gather to mark 3 years since Russia launched its war of aggression against Ukraine, in violation of international law and the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. On this occasion, we remember the countless civilians affected, especially the most vulnerable, women, children, and the elderly. Since then, Ukraine has stood firm, demonstrating remarkable courage and resilience in the face of aggression. The time has come for this war to stop, and for the international community to stand firm in defending the principles of the United Nations Charter. It is time for Europe, the United States, Ukraine, and also Russia itself to work together to achieve a just and lasting peace. From the outset, Malta has been unequivocal. Ukraine's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders must be withheld. We remain steadfast in this commitment. Malta has consistently demonstrated its unwavering support for the efforts shown by different partners to assist Ukraine. The EU and its member states have played a huge part, including through the provision of vital humanitarian assistance to displaced persons, the reconstruction of critical infrastructures, sanctions, and the provision of non-lethal military assistance through the European Peace Facility. Throughout our tenure as an elected member of the UN Security Council, and in our role as chair of the OSCE in 2024, Malta has maintained a firm and principled stance on the importance of upholding Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. As developments unfold, we must be clear in our strategy, firm in our demands, and unwavering in our continued support for Ukraine. Malta will continue to engage constructively in initiatives to put Ukraine in a position of strength and at the same time reinforce Europe's own resilience against external threats. While respecting our constitutional commitment to neutrality, Malta shall continue with its advocacy for the full respect of international law and the active pursuit of peace, security, and social progress. In the last few months, different initiatives have been put on the table. Malta has been strong in underlining that it stands ready to support any peace process that is grounded in the principles of the UN Charter. It is imperative that this peace process has the input of all the key players. Europe must play a central role, as the outcome of the discussions will shape the future of our continent and our collective security. Furthermore, it is inconceivable that Ukraine be sidelined and left out of the equation. History has shown that appeasement does not work. A lasting peace cannot be imposed. Europe and the United States share a strategic interest in securing peace. It is key that Europe and the US remain united and stand steadfast in ensuring that no country succeeds in redrawing borders through coercion and the use of force. To our Ukrainian friends, you know better than anyone else that the way ahead is not easy. As you look to Europe for leadership, security, and ultimately EU membership, know that we are ready to answer your call. Let there be no doubt, Ukraine, you are not alone. Malta will continue to stand by you, shoulder to shoulder, in defense of your independence, your sovereignty, and your territorial integrity, according to the tenets of international law. Thank you all.
Дуже дякуємо і маю честь надати слово його високоповажності пану Ульфу Крістерсону, прем'єр-міністру Королівства Швеція. Швеція є нашим надійним партнером, є нашим найближчим союзником. Прошу, пане прем'єр-міністр.
Thank you so much, and dear Volodymyr, dear friends, we're all honored to be here in Kyiv on this very special day. What you Ukrainians have achieved in the last 3 years is actually astonishing. You have withstood an all-out attack by Europe's biggest army. You have taken huge strides towards membership in the European Union. Your institutions have continued to deliver for your citizens despite the war, and your economy keeps creating employment and growth, and not least innovation. All this despite Russia's daily attacks on your people, your energy supply, your infrastructure. Ukraine has truly become a symbol for resilience around the world. This is simply remarkable. Throughout these 3 devastating years, you have also had friends, not only here in Europe. Throughout the world, countries are demonstrating their opposition to Russia's aggression, its atrocities against your people, its attempts to destroy your economy, because they know that if Russia and Russia's crimes against Ukraine go unpunished, then the world will become dangerous for all of us. Throughout these 1,096 days, if I'm counting correctly, Ukraine has taken on an outsized part of the burden for Europe's security. This we need to acknowledge as we pay our deepest respect to all the people, civilians and military, that have been killed. As the US administration now takes initiatives, we may be entering a new and decisive phase. Europe and our partners now need to step up, as Mette said, our own efforts in support of Ukraine. European countries are taking on this task, and Sweden will assume our full share of it. First, we will further increase our military aid to Ukraine. Earlier this month, we announced our largest military support package so far, and today I can announce that we will allocate another 100 million euros for Ukraine's air defenses. We are already working on our next military support package. Second, we are working to further raise the cost of aggression for Russia and its enablers. We are making efforts to limit Russia's revenues from oil export and to introduce new sanctions. And finally, third, we have made important progress on a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Russia must be held accountable for its illegal war. At this uncertain time, Sweden's task, and the task of all your partners, is to support Ukraine towards a just and lasting peace. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. Тепер я надаю слово його високоповажності пану Іліє Боложану, виконуючому обов'язки президента Румунії. Румунія справді є чудовим партнером і послідовним прихильником України. Прошу.
Domnule președinte Zelenski, doamnelor și domnilor, se împlinesc astăzi 3 ani de la lansarea invaziei Rusiei împotriva Ucrainei și în curând se vor împlini 11 ani de când Ucraina își apără în mod curajos libertatea, independența și teritoriul. Folosesc acest prilej pentru a sublinia respectul nostru pentru curajosul popor ucrainean care luptă cu eroism și sacrificii enorme împotriva agresiunii ruse. Gândurile mele se îndreaptă spre cei care au avut de suferit de pe urma războiului, spre cei care și-au pierdut membrii familiilor, spre cei răniți, spre cei care nu mai au locuințe și spre cei refugiați. Securitatea Ucrainei este esențială atât pentru România, cât și pentru întreg continentul european. În aceste momente de cumpănă, în care se discută despre eforturile de pace, trebuie să continuăm sprijinul pentru Ucraina, nu numai acum, ci și în etapele care vor urma în procesul de pace și cel de reconstrucție. România a fost de la început alături de Ucraina.
By Ukraine from the very beginning, we have consistently supported it and we will continue to do so in the future. It is in our interests all to share this goal, which is also the goal of the US, to end this war, which has been lasting for too long and has destroyed too many lives. At the same time, it is necessary for Ukraine and the European Union to be involved in all peace negotiations. Romania stands ready to coordinate with all partners, European, American, and allies, to help find a way to a just and lasting peace. It is obvious that we must increase our investments in defense in order to strengthen our security, to have a plan and coordination for defense and deterrence. The solidarity of Ukraine's friends remains essential, and our support matters now when the fate of peace is at stake. The success of these efforts will only be proved when Ukraine has become stable and prosperous again and beneficiary of an arrangement of solid security guarantees. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. Зараз я надаю слово його високоповажності пану Олександру Шаленбергу, федеральному канцлеру Австрійської Республіки. Австрія яскраво демонструє, що бути нейтральною країною не значить бути байдужою по відношенню до зла. Будь ласка.
Dear colleagues, dear Volodymyr, dear Andrei, you're absolutely right. Being neutral doesn't prevent Austria to having a very clear stance on this issue. Today, we sadly mark 3 years since Russia launched an unprovoked, brutal and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. For 3 years now, we have had to witness, day in, day out, how Russia brought about tremendous destruction, unspeakable suffering and immense despair to Ukraine and its brave people. Dear colleagues, the Ukrainian people have been defending with immense courage and sacrifice not only their own way of living and their aspirations for the future, but also, and I believe we all agree on that, our common values, our common principles, our common freedoms. And yes, we share a common responsibility for the security, for the freedom and prosperity of our European continent, including Ukraine. And we have to do this with self-confidence and calmness and firmness. It is clear this brutal war must stop. The earlier, the better. And like any war, it has to end at the negotiating table, with all parties concerned sitting at the table. But it must not end under any circumstances, and I don't believe it will, as an imposed peace. We want, I believe we all share the same view, a comprehensive, a just, a lasting peace based on international law. A peace that guarantees the interest of Ukraine and our own. We will continue to work with our global partners in achieving this important objective. But one thing has to be crystal clear. Negotiations on Ukraine must include Ukraine, just as talks on the European security must include all concerned parties in Europe. We will continue as Austria to support all serious efforts towards a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine. In our capacity as host as one of the UN headquarters and seat of the OSCE, we also stand ready to provide a venue and to facilitate discussions if needed. Since day one, dear colleagues, Austria has stood in full solidarity with Ukraine and its people and has been providing extensive humanitarian, financial, and diplomatic support. In addition to our contribution in the framework of the European Union, the Austrian government has so far provided almost 300 million euros in bilateral assistance. Furthermore, Austrian Länder, municipalities, businesses, and the civil society have also shown enormous support and generosity vis-à-vis the people of Ukraine. And I can assure you, we will continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Дякую. Маю честь запросити до виступу його високоповажність пана Педро Санчеса, голову уряду Королівства Іспанії. Ми вдячні за вашу активну роль у підтримці України.
Thank you, dear Volodymyr, dear friends. Since the 24th of February of 2022, already 3 years ago, we have witnessed a systematic violation of the most basic principles of humanity here in Ukraine. The war crimes committed by Putin's regime cannot go unpunished. Spain condemns once again with the utmost resolve this merciless war started by Putin, irrational and unjust war that has caused immense suffering, pain and despair to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. The Spanish people admire the courage with which Ukrainians are defending freedom and democracy, an example of dignity and resistance against Putin's brutal aggression. At these critical times, let me highlight 3 messages. The first one is that Spain is committed to the full sovereignty of Ukraine. All Ukraine can decide its future. Spain welcomes all efforts to work towards peace, but peace must be fair, sustainable, and comprehensive. For peace to be just, Ukraine needs to sit at the negotiation table. For peace to be sustainable, Europe has to participate in it. For peace to be comprehensive, it cannot be a mere ceasefire. Second, we will continue supporting as long as it takes. We will not let you down when you need us the most. Spain will continue to provide military support and equipment with even more determination than what we have done in the past. In this regard, I'm proud to announce a new military assistance package for Ukraine worth 1 billion euros in 2025. We will also work hand in hand with Ukraine in its reconstruction, creating the necessary structure to boost the process and encouraging Spanish companies to actively engage in plans and projects. We must also address the needs of the Ukrainian diaspora. That is why I'm also happy to share that Spain and Ukraine will establish a Ukrainian hub, Casa Ucrania, in the province of Alicante. And third, we must ensure that Ukraine joins the European Union as soon as we can. Whatever happens in the coming months, Ukrainians' accession to the European Union is the most important victory for the Ukrainian people. Ukraine's hope is in Europe, but Europe's hope is also in Ukraine. You are giving us hope by defending the values and ideas of freedom for which many Europeans gave their lives in the past. Allow me to conclude precisely with this idea of hope. Difficult months lie ahead, but in this terrible period, freedom and democracy will prevail over violence and authoritarianism. The Ukrainian people can count on Spain. Rest assured, we will be with you as long as it takes and as much as you need. Slava Ukraini, Viva Europa.
Дуже дякуємо. І тепер я запрошую до виступу його високоповажність пана Барта де Вевера, прем'єр-міністра Бельгії. Бельгія є другим і партнером, який відіграє надзвичайно важливу роль у підтримці зростаючого флоту F-16 України. Ми цінуємо це. Будь ласка.
Dear President Zelensky, вітаю народ України. Я вжану в ящик солдатів. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by saluting the bravery of Ukraine in resisting criminal Russian aggression since 3 years. We must see the Russian regime for what it is. Its total disregard for international law, its horrifying attacks against civilians, and its attempts to erase Ukrainian culture have made it perfectly clear that to ensure the protection of our countries and the European continent, we must not appease, but deter Russia. Support to Ukraine remains a key part of this endeavor. Recently, talk of negotiations towards a deal to settle the war has accelerated, but also stunned the alliance of those who, from the start, have supported Ukraine in its defense against a ruthless Russian aggressor. Stunned because it does not seem a given that Ukraine or the EU will have much of a voice in the proceedings. A peace agreement that does not take into consideration the valid interests and demands of the victims of aggression and their allies and neighbors has no chance to hold. Belgium cannot accept that decisions on the future of Ukraine and the security and stability of the European continent are taken without the participation of Ukraine and its European allies. Our priority now is to come to a coordinated European position to claim a seat at the table in view of a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace. As a founding member of the European Union, we will always work towards a united, strong, prosperous and above all, peaceful Europe. And Ukraine belongs within this Europe. Meanwhile, Ukraine will continue to be able to count on Belgian assistance as specified in the Belgian-Ukrainian Bilateral Security Agreement that was signed last year. This includes the delivery of F-16 fighter jets, the implementation of the 4-year reconstruction program by our development agency, and support to Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration. I would like to support all speakers that have pleaded today to do more as European allies of Ukraine as quickly as possible. Exactly 60 years ago, the great President Ronald Reagan spoke about peace through strength in his famous speech, A Time for Choosing. He said, "You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. A world in which borders can be forcibly withdrawn will be less safe, less prosperous, and less just. We've had ample opportunity to learn this valuable lesson in the past. Slava Ukraini." I thank you.
Дуже дякую. Тепер я радий запросити його високоповажність пана Росена Желязкова, прем'єр-міністра Республіки Болгарія. Ми вдячні Болгарії за всю надану підтримку і допомогу. Будь ласка.
Шановний президенте Зеленський, шановні українські колеги, dear colleagues, 3 years ago, Russia launched a war of aggression against Ukraine, a war which is a direct assault against the peace and stability in Europe and the world, against the UN Charter and the principles of international law. Today, as we mark this dreadful anniversary, we gather to reflect on the struggle of the Ukrainian people and also to reaffirm our collective commitment to peace, sovereignty, justice, and the primacy of international law. The Ukrainian people have been living in suffering and destruction for more than 1,000 days now. Critical civilian infrastructure, such as nuclear plants and dams, have been damaged by military actions, in complete disregard of the potential consequences for the environment and the civilian population far beyond the front lines. Ukraine has bravely held its ground, but the human cost of the war has been staggering. Tens of thousands of civilians, including children, have been killed or wounded. Millions have been forced to flee their homes seeking safety and refugee in neighboring countries and beyond. Forceful displacement, illegal abduction and deportation, even of children, have been the terrible experience of thousands of innocent Ukrainians. Ladies and gentlemen, there must be no negotiations on peace in Ukraine without Ukraine and the European Union. Ukraine must be given credible and robust security guarantees which are indispensable to any comprehensive, just and lasting peace on our continent. In the meantime, while Russia's war still rages on, we must continue our comprehensive support to Ukraine. Peace through strength is the viable strategy to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position ahead of any peace talks. Dear friends, Bulgaria reiterates its support for Ukrainians' independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. From the very beginning of the war, Bulgaria has been providing military, financial, political, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine as part of the international support efforts. We will continue to do so as long as we can and to do the best of our abilities. As a member of European Union and NATO, Bulgaria reaffirms its commitment to further supporting Ukraine. Ukraine's future lies within the European family and the transatlantic. The Ukrainian people must be given an opportunity to rebuild a strong, resilient, and democratic Ukraine. Only through unity and resolve can we make sure that the sacrifices made over the past 3 years are not in vain and will lead to a brighter, more secure future for Ukraine and for all of Europe and the world. Slava Ukraini! Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. А зараз з великим задоволенням прошу взяти слово його високоповажність пана Кіра Стармера, прем'єр-міністра Сполученого Королівства Великої Британії та Північної Ірландії. Ваше лідерство абсолютно безпрецедентне. Прошу до слова.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, let me start with Vladimir and say on this day of all days, I want to pay tribute to your leadership, Vladimir. And friends, it is right that we mark this grim anniversary together. For 3 years, we have been united in opposition to Russia's barbaric invasion. And for 3 years, we've been full of admiration for the incredible response of the Ukrainian people. Their voices must be at the heart of the drive for peace. And I want to be clear that I hear them. I think of the soldiers and the civilians that I met in Kyiv just a few weeks ago in the ICU, the burns unit, the witnesses to the horror of Bucha, the school children I met living under constant bombardment, the soldiers training in the UK bound for the front line. Their voices echo in my ears. They inform the decisions that I take and the peace that I believe that we must see. So I have a very simple, clear message today. The UK is with you today and every day. From His Majesty the King to the NHS workers volunteering in hospitals in Ukraine, to the communities that took Ukrainian refugees to their heart. And that's why I signed our 100-year partnership with President Zelensky last month, because we believe in Ukraine's fight today and the country's incredible potential to thrive in the years to come. This is a time for unity. In this crucial moment, as talks begin, we must work together to shape the outcome. Russia does not hold all the cards in this war because the Ukrainians have the courage to defend their country, because Russia's economy is in trouble, and because they have now lost the best of their land forces and their Black Sea fleet in this pointless invasion. So we must increase the pressure even further to deliver an enduring peace, not just a pause in the fighting. And we can do that in three ways. First, by stepping up our military support to Ukraine. And the UK is doing that, providing £4.5 billion in military aid this year, more than ever before. We're doing more than ever to train Ukrainian troops, helping Ukraine to mobilise even further. And we're proud to have taken on the leadership of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group. Secondly, we must keep dialling up the economic pressure to get Putin to a point where he is ready not just to talk, but to make concessions. So today we're announcing the UK's largest packet of sanctions since the early days of the war, going after Russia's shadow fleet and going after companies in China and elsewhere who are sending military components. Later today, I will be discussing further steps with the G7, and I'm clear that the G7 should be ready to take on more risk, including the oil price cap, sanctioning Russia's oil giants, and going after the banks that are enabling the evasion of sanctions. Third, we must bring our collective strength to the peace effort. President Trump has changed the global conversation over the last few weeks, and it has created an opportunity. Now we must get the fundamentals right. If we want peace to endure, Ukraine must have a seat at the table, and any settlement must be based on a sovereign Ukraine, backed up with strong security guarantees. The UK is ready and willing to support this with troops on the ground, with other Europeans, and with the right conditions in place. And ultimately, a US backstop will be vital to deter Russia from launching another invasion in just a few years' time. So we will do everything we can to get the best outcome for Ukraine and for us all. And let me close with one of the voices I mentioned earlier, a patient called Petro from the burns unit that I visited in Kyiv. He said to me, if Ukraine fails, Europe will be next. And that is what is at stake here. That is why we will always stand with Ukraine and with our allies against this aggression and for a just and lasting peace. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Ще раз дякуємо вам за ваше лідерство. Ми продовжуємо включення з особливих місць нашого опору та стійкості. І зараз я маю честь передати слово пані Ользі Каменевій, лікарю, яка виконує свої обов'язки в Херсоні, місті, яке було звільнене від російської окупації. Будь ласка.
Your Excellency, Mr. President and international partners, Kherson is a city of heroes that fights for the independence of Ukraine. Every day, our city endures relentless attacks on civilian infrastructure. Yet, the people of Kherson continue to live and to fight. Today, we address you from the newly constructed underground maternity hospital, established through the initiative and support of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. In this facility, under extraordinary challenging conditions, dedicated medical
Так, у нас технічний збій. Ми можемо продовжувати? Якщо ні, то я маю особливу честь і з великим задоволенням прошу взяти слово його важність пана Йонаса Гар Стере, прем'єр-міністра Королівства Норвегія. Норвегія демонструє справжнє лідерство та стратегічний підхід у підтримці України.
Thank you, Andrei, and thank you, Volodymyr. Since I believe this emission is being streamed, And if I can say a few words to the people of Ukraine, you know, I was incredibly moved by this session at the Maidan this morning. I'm a father and I'm a grandfather, and I was wandering among those flags, and I was seeing the dates of those boys corresponding to the dates of my children. And, you know, the number of flags and the number of people, I'd just like to tell the people of Ukraine that it makes a deep impression on us on this third anniversary, but there are more than 1,000 days, and the days are counting. So this human dimension of this day really makes a strong impression on me. Colleagues have made good remarks, so I will second that we continue to show our strong support to the people of Ukraine, to the basic principles that there has to be a comprehensive, just and sustainable peace. We all agree on that, and I will reiterate it simply by joining the voices of colleagues. As for Norway, today I will announce that we will contribute €1 billion for civilian and humanitarian support. And Mr. President, I take up on your request for energy support that you mentioned to me a few days ago. So there will be a €300 million package to gas supplies, according to the request you made, and also securing financial guarantees. In fact, it's €400 million, and also support for electricity reconstruction of grid and try to build back better and smarter. We also follow a bit in the path of what Denmark has done to open a direct investment channel into your industry. So we will also put €300 million and into a specific track here with your industry, where we may have complementarity between our industries, and also a special pledge for drones, which I think will be of great importance. And also, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, in the NB8, meaning Nordic 5, Baltic 3, we have agreed to take up on your suggestion to train, fund, and help equip a brigade. So I think, you know, leaders have agreed that we will do that now. It's a flexible concept. It will of course comprise of courageous Ukrainian troops, but we will train, equip, and support them. And then I'd like to say that what then lies ahead, and I'll make 3 points. First, we need to scale up, as colleagues have said. This is not the moment to pause and wait and see. We have to scale up. So I say on behalf of Norway, we have pledged the €3.5 billion for 2025, approximately, but we are ready to scale that up, and I will engage with you in the coming days and weeks to see how we can do that in the best way, so it really corresponds most directly with your needs. Secondly, I'd like to second President Stubb on what he was saying about process, because I think this is absolutely key, that we make a real reflection on what this peace process means and how Europe can add substance and momentum to that one. There is now talks between US and Russia, but I think Prime Minister Starmer said it diplomatically. We need to get the fundamentals right. And the fundamentals are not, let me put it that way, complete, if it's only this dialogue in the way we see it. And I don't think, you know, we all agree that there can be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. But let me put it this way bluntly. Europe cannot complain its way to the table. It cannot simply raise its hand and say, here are we, include us. Because I think the US president will say, what are you bringing? Why should you? And you get all this dialogue that we are experiencing over these 4 or 5 weeks. So that means that Europe really has to get there through strength, politically, financially, and militarily. And allow me, President Costa, to say that, and Ursula, that I am not EU. I see Europe as being slightly more than EU here. It is, of course, the EU 27. Perhaps not all 27, but let's say EU 27. But then there is UK.
Yeah, almost 28.
Yeah. There is UK, there is fundamentally Turkey, and Turkey is always a bit complex, but Turkey has to be in the equation. And we heard President Erdogan and your recent visit, Volodymyr. Turkey has to be there. Norway is proud to be there. Iceland is proud to be there. And we even heard President Macron said the other day that Canada is there. We are buying Canada, so we can get them back. No, but I think, you know, this is that concept of Europe. But that concept of Europe has to have an opinion on the substance of the peace and the process of the peace. And here I think there's no time to lose. I think your convening of the meeting on the 6th of March is great. But then for this larger group, we have to come together and make it meaningful. Macron is in Washington today, Starmer in another few days, but we have to bring this together. Because if we don't, there is not a European voice, and then we are simply much weaker. So my final point here is that for us to make a contribution to security guarantees, and we have to do that, the best and fundamental security guarantee is to bolster Ukraine, that Ukraine has strong capacity from its military capacity. Then there has to be a European security guarantee with a US backstop. And I think we should not give up on that, because it should really be in a fundamental US interest to see the value of this. Because now we hear that this is a European thing, but I think there's a good case to be made by this is linked together. So there's no time to lose, really. Finally, when we saw this from the clinic here, I read and met the other day Timothy Snyder in Oslo, and he has written extensively on Ukraine, and he's using this notion to define freedom. And he is saying the Ukrainians have invented a word which is called de-occupy. I never heard that before. We are being de-occupied. So the question was, is a village, is Bucha a free city? Do they enjoy freedom just because they are de-occupied? And the answer is no. You are still under war, you are still under attack. So defending Ukraine's freedom is not only about securing the occupation, it's securing sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. That is the package of freedom. Slava Ukraini.
Дуже дякуємо вам, шановний пане прем'єр-міністре. І маю честь запросити до слова його високоповажність пана Кіріакоса Міцотакіса, прем'єр-міністра Грецької Республіки. Ми вдячні за політичну і практичну підтримку нашої країни.
Thank you, dear Volodymyr. Dear colleagues, today we mark the third anniversary of Russia's brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. A watershed shattered a long period of peace and stability in our continent. From the very beginning, Greece has steadfastly supported the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. We have been unwavering in our calls for the respect of international law and the United Nations Charter. And Greece has faithfully stood by Ukraine, has provided vital military but also energy assistance. It has opened up its doors to thousands of refugees who fled the horrors of war. 3 years since the invasion began, I think it is an important opportunity to remember that the human toll has been immense. There's been so much suffering, so much destruction, so many lives that have been disrupted, and it is imperative that we all work towards bringing this to an end. And your sacrifices and the sacrifices of your people, dear Volodymyr, cannot be in vain. And I think it is important to take a step back and recognize that your resilience and your courage, your personal courage, has been remarkable. Ukraine, Europe, I think the whole world yearns for a just and lasting peace settlement. Ukraine deserves a peace that is forged through strength, and a peace that will respect its independence, but primarily will ensure its security. At the same time, I think it has been a common thread of all our interventions. Only Ukraine can, should, and will decide on accepting or rejecting any peace formula. No one can make this decision for Kiev. And it must be ensured that Kiev is part of the process, and only Ukraine has the right to decide on its future. I think we have all agreed on two basic, simple principles: that a just peace cannot be confused with an unjust capitulation, nor can a temporary ceasefire be confused with a lasting peace. And we need a peace settlement with very clear security guarantees, which will act as deterrence and prevention in the future, guarantees that will be robust, that will be effective, so that any future aggression is deterred and peace is preserved.
The stakes have never been higher, in particular for our European security. And we are willing to work together with the European, with our American, with our international partners towards facilitating the attainment of a lasting peace. But we in Europe also need to step up our commitment to our own collective European defense. Greece has been spending more than 3% of our GDP on defense, and the time has come for others to do the same. And after 3 years of war that have brought destruction on an unimaginable scale, we need to support this goal. We need to act with greater resolve. We must not only bring an end to the current conflict, but make sure that we forge a model for preventing such calamities in the future. The road ahead is not going to be easy. Will undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but it's a vision that drives us forward, a future where Ukraine stands as a country in peace, a secure, democratic, independent, but also, dear Volodymyr, a European Ukraine, a nation that can look ahead with optimism and confidence. Thank you.
Дуже дякуємо. І тепер я надаю слово його високоповажності пану Міхалу Мартіну, Тішеху Ірландії. Ми вдячні вам за вашу підтримку і допомогу. Прошу.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, Vladimir, for convening us today. And I want to pay a personal tribute to you for your courage and your dignity throughout this war. I can recall 3 years ago at the EU Council meeting when you spoke to us on the eve of the illegal and brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And we were struck by your courage then. You took a decision personally to stand your ground and to lead the resistance of the people of Ukraine. And so did the people of Ukraine, who have earned the admiration of people all over the world for their extraordinary courage and their resilience in the face of incredible odds. We think of all of those who have lost their lives in protecting their homeland and in defending their people. And we think of all the children who have been abducted, which is an appalling war crime in itself and reminds us that there simply has to be accountability for war crimes of that magnitude and of that kind. And we will work with our colleagues in ensuring such accountability. For a small country like Ireland, the international rules-based order is ultimately the only basis for our security. And that is why the war that Ukraine has been defending its integrity and sovereignty is so important for small nations all over the world. You are protecting and fighting to uphold the principles of the United Nations Charter and in terms of sovereignty and integrity, but also in terms of the rules-based order. And in that context, Europe has been unified, has been firm so far. And we in Ireland stand with you, and we do need to say more, we do need to spend more, and we need to do more. And Ireland will contribute more financially on all fronts and in all areas, and will strengthen our commitments on that front. I believe it's extremely important for us in the European Union to accelerate Ukraine's membership of the European Union, an important dimension to Ukraine's long-term security, and something that Ireland is very keen to push and to strongly support. Could I say also that we will continue to support sanctions and also the whole area of frozen assets and the utilization of frozen assets for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Because those who engage in illegal and brutal invasions and who breach the very basics of international rules and sovereignty have to know that ultimately there has to be a price for the destruction that has been wrought as a result of this war, particularly the destruction of the civilian and energy infrastructure of Ukraine itself. At the next European Union summit, the emergency summit being convened The 6th of March will be a very important moment for concrete actions which Ireland will strongly support, both the Commission and President Costa in the agenda that they will bring to the table on that occasion. I think it's very important also that we remember that Russia has not achieved the objectives that it set itself when it illegally invaded Ukraine 3 years ago. We need to remember that and take solace and strength from that, because the unity of the resistance has had an impact. What we must now resolve is to ensure that Russia is never rewarded for what it did 3 years ago. Thank you very much indeed.
Ще раз дуже вам дякуємо. І зараз я радий запросити до слова його високоповажність пана Крістена Міхала, прем'єр-міністра Естонської Республіки. Естонія є надзвичайно важливим союзником у нашій спільній боротьбі. Прошу.
Thank you. President Zelensky, dear colleagues, I'm very proud to be here on Estonia's 107th birthday. Today is the day. Standing by Ukraine to show the true meaning of friendship. Ukraine has shown the world the true meaning of resilience. In its monumental struggle against Russian aggression, Ukraine fights for its own freedom, but a world built on principles. A world where might does not make right, as Mette and Justin already said. Estonia will never recognize the changing of borders by force. We will always stand for your right to choose your own allies. Now is the time to do more and do it faster. We must speed up our support to Ukraine. Estonia increased its military aid to Ukraine by 25% last week. This comes on top of our commitment to allocate 0.25% of GDP annually to helping Ukraine. Together with Nordic Baltic countries, we support Ukraine by providing equipment and training to brigade-sized units. To do even more, if needed, to keep our commitment to make Ukraine stronger. We continue our work on Ukraine's reconstruction. We see Ukraine's future in EU and NATO and assist every way. It is also time to maximize pressure on Russia. We are working to ensure frozen assets are used to support Ukraine. Sanctions have already cut Russia off from the European financial and capital markets. Trade is severely limited. It is up to Europe to decide when and how we will change these measures. We, Europe, are forced to be reckoned with. I very much liked what Jonas already said, that you cannot complain yourself to the table. This comes through a push to cut Russia out of business. We fully support all the efforts of our partners to advance an ambitious aid to Ukraine and remain committed to maintaining open and constructive dialogue with the United States. Finally, a just and lasting peace requires the participation of Ukraine and Europe. Only Ukraine can decide its own terms for peace. No conditions should be imposed from the outside. No topic is off the table except one: surrender. Your fight is our fight, and your victory will be victory for European security. Slava Ukraini!
Дуже вам дякуємо, шановний пане прем'єр-міністре. А зараз я прошу взяти слово його високоповажність пана Даніеля Гріша, прем'єр-міністра князівства Ліхтенштейн. Ми вам вдячні за підтримку.
Thank you, Andrei. Dear Volodymyr, dear colleagues and friends, I wish to thank Ukraine for their leadership. Times are difficult, but difficult times need courageous ideas, steps and decisions. What the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian leadership did symbolizes exactly this courage, a courage to stand for European values, European unity and Europe itself. Today's summit serves therefore as an important occasion to honor Ukraine's unwavering courage in defending itself, in defending Europe and the rule of law as the cornerstone of our security architecture. I do agree with all the important remarks my dear colleagues did before me, and I therefore just like to highlight 3 points from a Liechtenstein perspective. Firstly, a peace effort will only be sustainable and lasting
if it has Ukraine's consent and deters the crime of aggression. Secondly, Europe's security depends on the security of Ukraine. Liechtenstein calls for a just and lasting peace in line with the international community's clearly established benchmarks set out by the United Nations General Assembly. This includes accountability for war crimes and reparations by the aggressor. And importantly, we need European answers to European problems, and we need a vision where our continent is heading to. I am therefore thankful for the words of EU President Ursula von der Leyen, the words of President Zelensky, and the ones that spoke before me. As most of you know, Liechtenstein reached out in the last month to receive your vision and the thoughts about Europe in these challenging times, and especially against the background of Russia's war in Ukraine. These days, all of you will receive a copy of the Book of Europe. You can see behind me with the subtitle First-Hand Visions of the Future of Europe, which will be released this very Thursday at the Strasbourg. I am very thankful to all of you who contributed to personal visions of Europe, beginning with the today present Prime Ministers of UK, Spain, Norway, Albania or Ukraine, and more than 30 leaders of Europe. I am also thankful to the Liechtenstein Parliament for their courage and vision to dedicate an additional budget line to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine. With its decision, our Parliament made it very clear that a rebuilt Ukraine must be part of the vision of Europe. We all know that every cloud has a silver lining, and for me, that silver lining of the current situation is that we in Europe stand together to continue to work on a good, strong, and united Europe. A Europe where, like in a team, every member contributes and adds value based on its capabilities and strengths. Slava Ukraini, Slava Європі.
Слава, дуже вам дякуємо. І тепер я запрошую до виступу його високоповажність пана Люка Фрідена, прем'єр-міністра Люксембургу. Цінуємо вашу допомогу. Прошу.
Dear colleagues, 3 years ago, no, I should say 10 years ago, Russia launched an illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. But all those years, Ukraine's resilience remains unshaken. On this occasion, I would therefore like to pay a tribute to the thousands of brave Ukrainians that have made the ultimate sacrifice, and to the courage of the millions of Ukrainians that continue to endure unimaginable suffering, fear, and to defend our freedom. This is a war, and now is a time when fundamental principles of the world order are tested. And I would therefore like today at this gathering to highlight 3 points. First, when international law is trampled on, when the principles enshrined in the UN Charter are violated, the price we all end up having to pay is high, especially for smaller nations. As Miriam from Ireland also stressed a few moments ago. Ukraine's fight is therefore our fight. Because if we allow aggression to succeed, it will happen again. It is up to us to ensure that we preserve a world, yes, way of life for the generations to come, in which international law is respected, upheld by force. Second, Ukraine's future is tied to ours, and European security depends on all of us standing together, firmer and more united than ever. This means strengthening our Europe and our collective support, militarily, financially, and politically, to ensure Ukraine not endures, but prevails. It also means that we continue to support Ukraine to achieve peace through strength, a just and lasting peace, a peace negotiated by Ukraine, by Europe, for Europe. Third, the cost of standing with Ukraine is real. The cost of inaction is far greater. If we let aggression win, we undermine the very foundations of European peace and stability. My country, Luxembourg, will not be a bystander. We will continue to support Ukraine, not just because it is the right thing to do, but because it is vital for our own future. As Europeans, it is our duty to match Ukraine's courage with unwavering solidarity. Because it is not just about one country's survival, it is about the future of Europe itself. And therefore, I also welcome Antonio Costa's invitation for an extraordinary European Council in the next week. In January 2005, I stood in Kiev at the end of the Orange Revolution on behalf of the then Luxembourg presidency of the European Union. And I said, Ukraine has a strategic importance for the European Union. That was true at the time, and it is even more true today. Dear Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, you can count on Luxembourg's unwavering support to you, your country, and your people. Thank you.
Дуже вам дякуємо. Ми знову переносимося в особливі місця, і зараз ми підключатимемося з керівництвом Запорізького регіону, який щодня потерпає від російського терору, від щоденних обстрілів. Будь ласка.
Dear Mr. President, dear diplomats and representatives of our partner countries, right now we are speaking to you from underground school, located 7 meters deep. This is because the fighting is taken just 40 kilometers away. And enemy missiles can reach Zaporizhzhia in under 1 minute. That is why 60,000 of our children have to study underground. Right now, behind me, the children are holding photos of destructions of enemy bring-ins to our region every day. Every day, our enemies fires missiles, building bombs, and Shahed drones cross the region. As a result, over 17,000 buildings were damaged. As an example, during the last day, the enemy attacked the Zaporizhzhia region more than 400 times. Despite all this, we stay strong. At the same time, here in Zaporizhzhia region, thanks for support of Ukrainian people, President Volodymyr Zelensky and our international partners, our region continue to support life of hundreds of thousands of people. We are keeping schools, kindergarten, hospitals, other critical infrastructure operationally and much more. For over 1 million people who left their occupation, Zaporizhzhia has become a logistic hub, and over 200,000 IDPs stay here. All these people are dependent on your support, dear international partners. We can only stand up to the aggressor with uniting of efforts. We thank everyone who stands by our people in this challenging time. Our region continues to unbreak important work to the front line. Together, we will win.
Mr. President, dear diplomats, partners, and guests, Zaporizhzhia is going through very hard times. Every day, the enemy attacks us that takes the life of our people. Even with dangers, we keep working. We make sure the city functions, repair buildings, and help people. Thousands of the workers, rescuers, teachers, and volunteers work day and night, sometimes for days without rest. Right now, we are speaking from an underground school built in Zaporizhzhia with the help of the President and First Lady. For the first time in 3 years, children have returned to school. They sit at their desks and meet their classmates. Teachers finally saw all their students together. There are already several schools like this, but they are more than just schools. They are a symbol of their strength and hope. We thank everyone who supports us.
Zaporizhzhia is a city of strong and brave people. We will stand until peace comes to our land.
Support to Ukraine, together to the victory.
Дуже дякуємо вам за стійкість. А тепер я радий надати слово її високоповажності пані Кріструн Фростадоттір, прем'єр-міністру Ісландії. Дякую за вашу активну підтримку України.
Thank you. Wow, it's so humbling to follow that. I have two young daughters, a 6-year-old who's starting school this fall. It's amazing to see what's going on here. I want to thank President Zelensky for hosting us here in Kyiv. This is my first visit here, and I'm very honored to be here in a group of people, our colleagues, who are among your most reliable and strongest partners. My presence here today is to underline Iceland's steadfast solidarity with the Ukrainian people and a resolute commitment to the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine. February 24th is a dark day in European history. 3 years ago, peace in Europe was shattered. All the norms and principles that have underpinned the rules-based international order since the Second World War were blatantly violated by Russia. Putin's intention was to destroy Ukraine. Instead, for 3 years, the people of Ukraine have stood strong, proud and unwavering against a brutal aggressor that has launched the gravest assault on global peace and security for 80 years. You have stood up for freedom, for democracy, and the rule of law. You have fought for values that a small democracy like mine bases its existence on. Because without respect for international law, without respect for the rules-based order, the security of countries like mine could easily be jeopardized. Zelensky, we recognize this. We recognize why you fight. You are fighting for the whole of Europe, but your brave fight for these fundamental values has come at a devastating cost. My deep condolences for all the Ukrainian lives that have been lost in Russia's senseless war. A few remarks on the situation as it stands right now. Firstly, this may sound obvious, but today the facts need to be stated. Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia is the aggressor. Ukrainians are defending their homeland and their freedom under the leadership of a democratically elected president and a democratically elected parliament. Secondly, Ukraine is a line of defense for our collective European security, and Iceland understands that. A strong Ukraine is a precondition for a just and lasting peace. Ukraine needs more support, and it must be immediate. Iceland has increased its assistance compared to last year, but we will do more. And I can announce today that my government has decided to more than double our defense-related support to the Ukraine this year to fulfill our commitments. We may be a small country, and our support in absolute terms will echo that. But we must do our share and are unwavering in our support for Ukraine. We stand with our Nordic Baltic allies as well as Europe in support measures going forward, and we will be implementing the 16th sanctions package without delay after it has become effective within the EU. Thirdly, we must project unity among like-minded countries. Europe needs to take the lead in support of Ukraine. On negotiations, there must be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and Europe must have a seat at the table too. Lasting peace will not be achieved without security guarantees, and a credible arrangement that is part of a comprehensive peace agreement depends on collective European commitments. We will be willing to contribute to this effort in a way that is fitting. Lastly, Ukraine belongs in the Euro-Atlantic family of free nations. I hope that the EU accession process will be accelerated. NATO membership should remain on the table, and Iceland is fully committed to the language that was agreed upon at the NATO summit in Washington. Iceland supports you Slava Ukraini!
Дуже дякуємо вам. Тепер я радий запросити його високоповажність пана Мілойка Спаїча, прем'єр-міністра Чорногорії. Цінуємо вашу підтримку.
Dear President Zelensky, dear colleagues, it is both an honor and a privilege to address you today at this pivotal summit, which marks the third anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is an important moment for us to reaffirm our unity in support of Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and freedom. This aggression has escalated into the most profound security and humanitarian crisis Europe has faced in decades. For the last 3 years, we have witnessed the horrors of war and daily attacks on Ukrainians, their homes, and their lives. Yet, they are still struggling for their homeland. But this is not only a fight for Ukraine. This is a fight for freedom, justice, and peace across the globe, aimed at preserving a world where dialogue, not war, resolves disputes. We in the Western Balkans have felt the destabilizing effect of this conflict too. For years, Russia has waged hybrid economic and information warfare aimed at undermining the security of the region. Montenegro condemns Russian ongoing invasion. We stand firm in our support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty within its internationally recognized borders. Therefore, since the onset of the war, Montenegro has provided substantial support to Ukraine, including military aid and financial assistance. Montenegro has been the first country outside of the EU which has opened its doors to those fleeing the horrors of war. Temporary protection, safe shelter, healthcare, and education for thousands of people from Ukraine, we have demonstrated our shared humanity and shown that the compassion is the truest form of the strength. As a steadfast ally within NATO and the most advanced candidate country in the negotiation process with the EU, Montenegro supports Ukraine's aspirations to join these organizations. We diligently work on necessary reforms and support each other in fulfilling memberships. Moreover, our two countries are currently negotiating an agreement on security cooperation and long-term support. This agreement will strengthen our defense and security ties, focusing on military assistance, defense industry collaboration, intelligence sharing, and countering cyber and hybrid threats. In addition to that, in close cooperation with our EU and NATO partners, Montenegro has fully aligned with sanctions against Russian Federation, targeting critical sectors including finance, energy, transport, and technology. Ladies and gentlemen, Montenegro knows very well the price of peace, the importance of independence, and the sacrifice it demands. Our history has taught us that freedom is a gift earned through resilience, unity, and unwavering resolve. It is in this spirit that we stand by Ukraine in its fight for the principles that bind us all: democracy, human rights, rule of law, liberty, dignity, and patriotism. While Montenegro strongly supports the beginning of diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict, it is essential that any peace be fair, just, and uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and right to chart its own path and orientation for the future. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Дуже вам дякуємо. І я радий запросити до слова його високоповажність пана Роберта Голоба, прем'єр-міністра Республіки Словенія. Цінуємо вашу допомогу.
Dear colleagues, today we mark a grim anniversary, 3 years since the start of the Russian brutal, unprovoked and illegal aggression on Ukraine. 3 years of gross violations of international law. Russia has ruthlessly trampled all principles and norms that the international community together agreed to guide us in our relations. Today, even more than usual, my thoughts are with the families, friends, and close ones of all the Ukrainian victims, with all the Ukrainian people. We have said it so many times, and we will continue saying it with the same vigor. Slovenia stands in solidarity with the Ukrainian people as they defend their homeland. And they are not fighting only for their country, but for our common values: freedom, democracy, and human dignity. Slovenia is a staunch supporter of the international